The room got quiet there. That makes me nervous when you all get quiet. Uh, Thank you. This is the public hearing of the Higher Education Committee. Today we're hearing public testimony on 7 bills uh, across a variety of different issues. I noticed we're joined by some guests today. Welcome to the committee. Did any of you bring any Girl Scout cookies?
Thin mints, maybe?
Yeah, nothing, yeah. Oh, well, we could hope, I guess. Um, Welcome to the committee. This committee deals with higher education, so we deal with a lot of issues related to colleges and universities, and that's what we're mostly going to be talking about today. So take good notes. I hope that you all know that after you finish school and graduate from high school, that there'll be a lot of different kinds of post-secondary education that's open to you. So you can go to college or university, or you can learn how to learn a trade and skill, get a good job. So it's a little premature to have this conversation, but we can we can dare to dream, and you should too. Um, uh, I wanted to clerk wanted me to remind folks who are joining us remotely and online that at some point if you're scheduled to testify remotely, you'll be invited to, what is the word? You'll be invited to be a participant. You'll be promoted. You'll receive a promotion to a panelist. You need to accept that promotion in order to testify in front of the committee. Um, and additionally, we're going to work to limit public testimony to 3 or 4 minutes initially, and that'll give myself, my co-chair, my co-chair Derek Slapp, and our ranking member Representative Bronco, and other members of the committee, should they join us, an opportunity to ask questions and follow up about your testimony. So thank you for joining us here today. And the first person signed up to testify is Lindsay DeStefano, who is the interim vice president for research at the University of Connecticut. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. So, honorable co-chairs, ranking members, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in strong support of House Bill 5479 and Senate Bill 428. My name is Lindsay DeStefano, and I'm the interim vice president of research at the University of Connecticut. I will address House Bill 5479 first. This bill implements UConn's action plan submitted last month pursuant to Special Act 25-3 to achieve membership in a national association of research universities such as the AAU. UConn already meets basic eligibility thresholds for membership in many key metrics. However, we rank in the lower 25 to 40 percentile of current members. So targeted further investment is essential for us to become competitive for an invitation. Membership in a National Association of Research Universities is far more than prestige. It's an economic engine for Connecticut. In fiscal year 2025, UConn Research generated over $700 million in statewide economic activity across more than 240 cities, towns, and villages, and supported over 3,000 high-skilled jobs. UConn's technology incubation program supports 20 to 40 early-stage companies annually, which have together raised over $1.4 billion. Our tech commercialization efforts have produced over 770 patents for the state of Connecticut. This is only the beginning of what we are capable of with strong further state investments. Membership would amplify this impact by enhancing our reputation, grant success, rankings and enrollment, attracting top talent and industry partnerships. So proven examples about this payoff, which are particularly interesting when looking at states that have pairings of prestigious public and private institutions like Connecticut does with UConn and Yale. North Carolina's Research Triangle, anchored by Duke and UNC, produces $178 billion annually for the state. California's Silicon Valley, Stanford, and UC Berkeley reaches $840 billion. Closer peers like UT Austin, 18 billion, Maryland, 3.7 billion, and Rutgers, 5.2 billion, demonstrate how research universities drive statewide prosperity. The action plan focuses on 3 priorities, all centered on faculty excellence: to recruit 10 high-impact faculty, invest in research infrastructure, strengthen support for existing faculty. Impacts from the new hires that are proposed in this bill would appear within 1 to 5 years. No new legislation beyond this bill is needed, but we ask for funds to be provided through appropriations and bonding mechanisms. This is an economic imperative for Connecticut. Without this investment, we risk falling behind states that have already leveraged their research universities for major gains. Passing HB 5479 will position UConn to deliver more jobs, innovation, and revenue for Connecticut families. UConn is grateful for the state's tremendous support for capital infrastructure that has greatly accelerated the research and innovation engine. Further targeted investments through the actions in this bill will pay off for UConn and, more importantly, for the state. I now turn to Senate Bill 428, which establishes the Academic Research Funding Commission and authorizes a $50 million investment in research at Connecticut's higher education institutions. UConn's research drives breakthroughs vital to the state, including biomedical and pharmaceutical sciences, to propel the advancement of new technologies into healthcare. Some of these critical examples that you may not be aware of are neuromodulation surgery to help patients regain function after stroke, efficient and high-quality pharmaceutical manufacturing to reduce healthcare costs and ensure the U.S. has a domestic supply of critical drugs, the ability to help physicians diagnose cancer and other diseases from their office, and the development of validation of wearable technologies to quickly identify if workers or military or athletes are too hot or dehydrated to help them stay productive and can save their lives. Our research with materials decreases the need for costly repairs that are vital for our aerospace and submarine industries. Our expertise in AI, data science, cybersecurity, quantum technologies are more critical than ever to help Connecticut contribute and be a leader in these opportunities across our sectors. And our social scientists are ready to work alongside these experts to help the technologies be ethically responsible. Our researchers are identifying new sustainable energy sources, ways to reduce energy costs with advanced manufacturing, including data centers needed for AI. These research efforts help Connecticut's water resources, the coastline, our communities from adverse weather events, help Eversource better predict and recover from power outages. Altogether, UConn research yields breakthroughs in industry competitiveness, helps educate our future workforce by involving students into our research, and keeps us safe and healthy. Since January 2025, however, federal research funding has become highly volatile. UConn's lost approximately $53 million. That's up $10 million in just the past 2 weeks, as we recently learned that the longest standing research center, the Elkhall Research Center, was not renewed, which was extremely unexpected. And we have sustained $54 million in fewer new awards compared to fiscal year 24, totaling over $100 million in direct, indirect losses. Many fundable proposals remain stalled at the National Science Foundation, NIH, and other agencies, which is jeopardizing dozens of programs, payrolls, and teams that support over 2,600 faculty, staff, trainees, and students. These cuts have forced difficult choices, admitting fewer graduate students, halting seed funding, and not renewing grant-funded staff. The impacts are real and immediate. State investment through SB 428 is now essential to protect the previous investments, protect our thriving engine, bridge federal disruptions and preserve ongoing projects, generate preliminary data to leverage future private support, and keep us aligned research with Connecticut's strategic priorities. This approach mirrors successful efforts elsewhere, such as Massachusetts' proposed $200 million DRIVE initiative to offset federal instability and grow research capacity at their institutions. In summary, both bills represent strategic investments in Connecticut's future. On behalf of the University of Connecticut, I respectfully urge favorable votes on House Bill 5479 and Senate Bill 428. We stand ready to partner with the Committee and General Assembly to implement these visionary measures for our state. Thank you for your continued support of UConn and Connecticut's research enterprise. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony and for being here. I wouldn't ordinarily do this, but let me just do something a little bit out of the ordinary. I just wanted to talk a little bit about your bio because you have
person listening to this, I'm like,
audience of girls behind you. And I can't think of a better example of a leader in Connecticut for us to sort of highlight than you right now in front of them testifying. And so I just wanted to let them know that that Dr. DeStefano has a bachelor's degree from the Boston University, a master's degree from the University of North Carolina. We'll forgive her for that. It's an ACC school, and her PhD from the University of North Carolina as well. She's an expert in her field and has, I'm looking at this online right now. It looks like 439 different published articles in her field, a number of awards, and is a member of a number of different associations. She's a great example of what you can aspire to be if you just work hard in school. So, yeah.
Thank you. And I have 3 kids around your ages.
Dr. DeStefano, first starting on the AAU proposal, I know that UConn did an analysis of where you're strong, and I know that this is an initiative that you've been working on for some time now. And I'll say it's a member of a research affiliation, I guess. The AAU is just one such organization. You specifically are asking for additional funding to attract eminent faculty. And I take it from your testimony and from the report that that's just the quickest way for UConn to sort of rise in the rankings in places where an application or I'm not sure application is the right word. Your profile is maybe not as strong as some of the top tier members of the AAU. But I'm also curious to know where you ranked in terms of some of the more recent additions to the AAU.
Yes, so great question. So we'll start with the last question first. So compared to the recent additions in the past 5 years, we are extremely on par and competitive, and which further, ignites the fire at UConn to say, like, we are right there. If they were to invite us right now, we would not stick out, right? We would, blend in very, very well. From an investment perspective, you're absolutely correct. By us being able to have dedicated funding to recruit some of the top talent in the United States, which the timing is impeccable because there has been a huge influx of some of our most premier scientists out of the federal agencies, and they are on the job market and there's a lot of universities who have unfortunately had to do layoffs. Fortunately, UConn has been able to prevent that on a widespread, thanks to much of your support. That being said, there are faculty that have citation, for example, metrics that as soon as they are hired, our calculations say that our global and national rankings will scale up by approximately 5 spots just by hiring them. And so that's the level of prestige. It just rises. I think over the past several years, UConn, again, thanks to the state's investment, we've been able to identify we cannot be everything to everyone. However, there are key areas that the state and UConn are positioned to continue to build in the excellence that are different than other of our aspirant universities. And so that's where the targeted hiring would take place to make sure that we, establish that strong footing as being the top 1 or 2 in these different research areas.
Thank you for that answer. And overall, the benefit of being a member of such a collection of research universities would be what? I just like what is the return on investment of the investment that we're being asked to consider?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So when you look at funding profiles, a lot of the federal agencies as well as industry partners, the reputation score goes up dramatically. When the reputation scores go up dramatically, so does the funding. And so when you compare the universities that are in some of these research university associations like the AAU, they have dominated close to 70% of all federal funding. And that's because of the reputations of the university by being part of sort of that group. It also creates a network where universities are more likely to collaborate with other universities within the AAU. Students look at that. The reputation scores across the country, also the world. So our global rankings are something that we're also paying attention to right now. 45% of those rankings are based on the academic reputation. And they specifically look, are they members of the highest kind of tier of research universities? This is an opportunity for the state. There's already been so much investment, fortunately, to UConn. We are, basically, we are thriving, and we are at a huge tipping point where if the state is serious about us being one of those preeminent research universities, and together with Yale, with the state becoming known in our key critical areas, we can do it.
Thank you. One last question about the AAU, and that is Yale is a member of the AAU. I don't think there are any other public universities in New England that are members of the AAU, UMass, other public universities. But you and I actually had a brief conversation right before this, and you said that Yale's research portfolio and UConn's research portfolio are actually pretty complementary. I mean, they don't compete against each other all too much. They're particularly strong in health related research, and UConn is in other kinds of research, right? Do you want to just expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you break down sort of Yale and UConn's research areas, Yale definitely, from a health science, medical science, the work coming out of Yale's medical school is tremendous. And if you remove that and you look at the rest of Yale's research portfolio, it's actually well below UConn's research portfolio outside of our School of Medicine. And so specifically in fields related to engineering, the defense industries, National Science Foundation, some of the basic science, advanced manufacturing work, and as well as the social sciences, this is where UConn and Yale are quite complementary. Again, this is a very unique time in our history because of, again, the previous state investments over the past 20 years have put UConn into the position we're in right now, which is we are just at the cusp of being known as one of the top national universities in the country, as well as the world. But also because of the Quantum NSF engine proposal, it created a natural opportunity for UConn to partner with Yale. And through that partnership over the past few years, more of our faculty have gotten together and realized, yes, we have these complementary strengths that together we can attack a lot of these problems. And that's what's happening now more than ever. The other thing is that 2025 also showed us that, partnering with peer-minded universities in our region is advantageous. And that's what's happening. And so I think at this point, the state is in an excellent position to really capitalize on the moment.
Thank you. Just one or two questions about the other initiative, which would create, as you mentioned, a $50 million state fund. It would empanel a group of experts, I'll just call them experts, from both public and private institutions in the state, and researchers doing research at institutions could apply for all or part of that of their funding from the new fund. It's patterned after the Massachusetts Drive Initiative, where they're doing something similar, although they did it on a much larger scale. They have more universities and a bigger state, but this is a bit more modest in terms of its the size. The legislation sort of prioritizes funding that's not available or is becoming clear is not available through the federal government. There's, as you said, it's a volatile situation. I think researchers are learning more and more about what the federal government is willing under this administration to fund and what they're not willing to fund. And to me, it just means that we're sort of maintaining the research lines that we want to maintain in Connecticut, whether or not those there's federal funding available. But it also can be argued that it's really complementary. Again, if we're going to spend money on research here in Connecticut, we should probably not concentrate on those areas of research that the federal government is willing to spend. And so it gets to be complementary. You had mentioned a couple of examples of lost funding, and you started, you mentioned one $10 million loss that we just experienced last week. I hadn't heard, if you want to expand on that a little bit, and maybe tell me a little bit more about other funding streams that have been closed or canceled here in Connecticut. That would be helpful.
Yes, no, absolutely. So the most recent non-renewal was UConn Health's Alcohol Research Center, which has been funded for 40 plus years. I can get you the exact year, Lincoln. And enjoy your day.
Listen, thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the day. All of those seats will make a clacking noise as soon as they get up. Every single one of them. We'll just pause for a moment while they get out. I mean, leave. One small group trapped in the corner. We'll wait until they get out. Some of them are loud, right?
Those. Nice. Well, no, I don't know, take care of this, but.
Now we'll wait for Senator Slap to find a seat. Won't take him long.
Oh, so much better.
There we go. We're good.
Yeah, it's good.
Go ahead. The research lines that have lost or at
Yeah.
risk.
Yes, absolutely. So the Alcohol Research Center is one. As I said, it's the longest standing NIH funded center at UConn, and it has focused on creating a variety of different evidence around substance abuse, specifically alcohol, but also some other substance abuse and addiction issues, from the basic science around it to even behavioral interventions. And that's been a cornerstone of strength, partnering with a lot of our psychology partners within UConn Health and UConn, and behavioral science folks, as well as physiologists. So that's one area. And then the other areas are honestly some of the areas that are most hit to the communities of the state of Connecticut. So we had a significant NSF funded program that studied and implemented techniques to drive STEM education into schools with students that did not have the resources to do that or prior attention, and really tried to arm the teachers to be more effective at providing the STEM education and motivation to go into those fields. Other work has been around our, again, long-standing program around providing support to school systems and communities around how to support children with developmental disabilities, and the SNAP Ed programs in the state, which worked to help communities, families, children's schools to help those receiving SNAP benefits actually know how to use the SNAP benefits effectively to find and purchase nutritious food, how to prepare it in a cost-effective manner, and while promoting overall health and wellness and physical activity. So those are some examples. NSF essentially has changed their entire portfolio to be dramatically only focused on AI and quantum, which obviously UConn is well positioned in that area. But by doing so, it is greatly reducing some of the investments in the basic science fields, which are paramount for future innovation. So the Ozempic drug, for example, weight loss, heavy in the news medication, right? That was created through basic science with Helio monsters, which is, some people would laugh about that science, like, really, you could get that? But that spawns discovery and is the effective way that we can come up with a lot of these solutions.
Thank you. I'm going to suspend my questions and ask if other members have questions or concerns. Representative Branco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my question might have been answered in testimony, but just for clarification, when we're talking about these research dollars, is there a separate pool of money that goes to these AAU schools, or are professors from UConn competing for the same dollars that are just being won out by professors at the AAU schools?
Yes, competing with, and oftentimes, so the review panels, et cetera, looking at reputation and the ability of the university to conduct that research and be successful.
All right, appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Senator Gadkar Wilcox.
Thank you very much, Dr. DeStefano, for being here, and very much appreciate your testimony underscoring the importance of research altogether. And as a faculty member myself at Quinnipiac University, the research that I do informs so much of my teaching. And I worry now, just at universities in general, that research component almost feels like an add-on instead of something that's integral to what we're doing. And not only for the research as an end in and of itself, but in the way that it informs classroom teaching and the kind of innovation that happens in that space as well. I did want to ask you two questions. One, I'm particularly concerned about funding for research in the humanities. So where are we when it comes to federal cuts or implications when it comes to like federal grants that have been available for the humanities? Because oftentimes now I think there's a default to funding in the sciences at the federal level, but the funding in the humanities has been so critical too, to understand complex systems and how we respond, for example, right, when those systems are failing us. And so if you can say a little bit more about what those federal impacts are for humanities funding in particular, I'd just be curious.
Yeah, no, great question. Absolutely. So funding in the humanities and, social science areas have definitely been hit among the hardest. We have started to see some positive movement, but that's kind of been the trajectory of the past 15 months is sort of this roller coaster. And so the stability of any of those funds are in question. But that is something that, we are very much watching and paying attention to at UConn, and something that we're also trying to drive within our research is ensuring that we have humanities and social scientists ready to, partner with some of our other scientists to complement, just as you said, and build those collaborative pieces.
So more of a focus on interdisciplinary inquiry.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then so two questions. One, what can we do to kind of raise awareness for the public? Because I think sometimes when we're isolated on academic campuses, we understand the importance of this, and we understand the importance of the role of faculty members to begin with. But I think we're sort of losing that narrative in the public eye. So what can be done to underscore the importance of research, not just as sort of a benefit that comes along with academic training, but in fact, the kind of benefit that comes to society and the classroom by really sort of honing in on research. So that's one, just awareness. And the other one is, where do we compare when it comes to other states in terms of our own investment in research? If you have information on that.
Yes. Okay. So lots of questions there. We're going to start with, again, the last one. So where do we stand in terms of investments in research? UConn as a whole, right, is, as a research intensive university, is a young child, maybe even I would argue a toddler type of age in terms of its growth, right? So we've seen tremendous growth in the past 20 years. And because of that, the state support has, dug in and provided, quite a lot. But the long-standing investments have not been there compared to, the Massachusetts, the California, where they have long established that desire to make sure that the state had premier research-intensive universities there. Similarly with our foundation, right? So our foundation has only been really energizing and accelerating sort of those funding sources for the past, 10 to 15 years has really started generating. So that's kind of where we are, is I would say as a state, we are relatively young, and that's why it's, sort of, this is the time to kind of dig in with, just like I would say to my 13-year-old, right? We got to pound you with nutrition because you are about to really accelerate. So that's where we are from that perspective. Just a quick other statistic I think is important. For every $10 that UConn's research enterprise spends on research, right? So no matter what the funding source is, right? We get funded to do research. We turn around and we either, buy materials from our companies in the state, we partner with communities, we spend that money back into the state. And that additional spending, as well as the tax revenue, et cetera, every $10 of investment returns at least $8 back. So, you are making a solid investment when we look at those types of perspectives. And I think the biggest thing that we need to do is, is to tell our story better, right? And tell the impact better. And, really look at, its investments being made into, yes, financial economy, but also the societal impacts of what does the state care about the most, right? And those are the pieces that continuing to do that research and that engagement, that's going to make the state better. So at UConn, we've launched over the past year, but we're accelerating it now, including even just in our faculty metrics of how we evaluate if faculty are productive in their research is what are their impact outcomes? Yes, we care about how much external funding they're bringing in, but we also care about is their research changing laws and policies? Are they getting into the media? Are they telling their story, as well as the traditional academic metrics? And those are things that I think the United States as a whole can do a whole lot better. So in the UK, like their whole funding model federally is based on those impact stories.
Oh, that's really helpful as a comparative analysis. Thank you so much for your comments.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions from members of the committee? I see none. So thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate you taking the time to spend with us.
Thank you all.
Next up is Representative Mara. She'll be followed by Representative Nuccio, who'll be joining us remotely.
Thank you so much, Chair Zadad and SLAP and Ranking Bronco and Martin. I appreciate you hearing me today. I am Tracy Mara and I am testifying in support of 5426. And this looks at requiring an advisor for students in higher education. This is very important to our community that particularly saw a rise in mental health and suicide in our community. So I guess I would like to do a forewarning to people that are coming into the room, if that's okay, if we could do a little PSA.
Yeah, I think that's probably advisable. Good idea.
These are going to be very weighty topics for young ears. So parental guidance is really suggested as we will be talking about suicide. I would like to, I have with me Laura Bremer, who is a board member at Wave Strong, which is an advocacy group in Darien, and I would like to cede my time to her, please. And thank you. To do anything here.
Thank you. I'd first like to start by thanking State Representative Tracy Mara for bringing Bill 5426 forward and the Higher Education Committee for their thoughtful consideration. My name is Laura Bremer. I am the mother of 3 adult children, ages 23, 21, and 18, and have been a Darien, Connecticut resident for 23 years. I am here today in a dual capacity, as a mother of 2 current college students, and as the co-founder of the Wave Strong Foundation, a grassroots organization born from the heartbreak of losing local students to suicide. I am also here as a voice and advocate for current and future college students, like many of the young girls who are here today, across the state of Connecticut who may find themselves someday facing disciplinary action during their college careers. While the law labels these students adults at 18, we know that the reality of their development tells us a different story. They are still deeply reliant on their support systems to navigate the intense pressures of college life. Currently, there is a dangerous conflict. Colleges operate in a silo of silence, leaving parents in the dark while students face life-altering crises alone. Bill 5426 bridges this gap, ensuring that no student is forced to navigate a terrifying legal or disciplinary process without a trusted advisor by their side. The data confirms that this is the responsible path forward. Science tells us that the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for impulse control, judgment, and complex decision-making, is the last to develop. For women, this maturity isn't reached until ages 21 to 23, and for men, it can be as late as 25 to 27. We are essentially asking students to navigate high-stakes legal and disciplinary hurdles during the exact years their brains are still under construction. By passing this bill, we are aligning Connecticut's policies with biological reality, ensuring that a student in a state of neurological development has a seasoned advisor to help bridge the gap in judgment. Through the Wavestrong Foundation, I have seen the devastating aftermath of psychological shock. High-achieving students are often the most fragile when they face their first major failure. When an acute stress reaction happens, fear and helplessness take over. As I learned from Gina and Steve Meyer, their daughter Katie wasn't given the time or the support to navigate that shock. She was alone with an email. We have to be better than that. If we know that these urgent punitive communications could trigger a life-threatening emotional response, we have a moral obligation to ensure an advisor is present to intervene. This bill isn't just a procedural update, it's a suicide prevention measure. We must learn from Katie and the legislation that her parents have passed in the state of California to protect as many of our Connecticut students as possible. We have the benefit of hindsight that many others do not. In Connecticut, we pride ourselves on our educational institutions, but if those institutions lack a human safety net, we are failing our children. As a mother and a mental health advocate, I am asking you to codify compassion. By granting students a trusted advisor, you are ensuring that due process includes mental health safety. We have the data, we have the tragic blueprints from other states, and now we have the opportunity to lead. Let us pass this bill so that no parent ever has to say, if only someone had been there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Branco has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Laura, and Rep Mar for being here and sharing your story. There was some, in reading some testimony and some potential opposition, I think just some clarity might suffice. So with this advisor role, now, can you explain what you're looking for? We're not talking about a legal counsel or someone like an attorney, but can you just speak to, what you're looking for?
Thank you so much. I think that's a really important question. When kids go into college, the parent doesn't even get to see the grades or the financials or anything. They have to sign papers in order for their parents to see that. We envision this to be something similar where you're going in and you have maybe a parent, probably 90% of the time it's going to be a parent. It could be your pastor, it could be your high school coach or your auntie or something that is also that point person that if something happens that you can bring them into the situation. How we wrote it was very simple, just requiring that the student can have that advocate. Other states have had it so that advocate also is required to see information from disciplinary proceedings throughout, which I think would be something we would be interested in seeing as well.
Thank you for that. And so is it fair to say that in this advisory, you're really looking to make sure a student has moral support or someone there? They're non-participatory in the proceedings. They're just there to be there with the student. Is that fair?
I think they can be participate in the proceedings as well, but they're not there as legal counsel. They're there as moral support, like you said, making sure that that student has someone else that they're turning to that also is getting the same information.
Okay, and a university wouldn't be required to appoint someone. That this would be a student option. All right, appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Senator Slapp.
Yeah, thank you for your testimony. Thanks for your leadership on this issue. Just following up on a question from my good colleague, Representative Branco. If I don't know if you've seen the testimony from Representative of UConn, and it might be worth it just to take a look after this hearing. I think they're generally aligned with with this, but to Representative Branco's point, they want to clarify that it's not essentially a mandate on the schools to provide somebody or train somebody, et cetera. So I think we're all kind of in alignment on that. And so anyway, that may be helpful. They have proposed an amendment, which I know it sounds like you haven't had a chance to look at. So after this, maybe take a look and get back to us and we can continue that dialogue. Okay.
Absolutely. Happy to look at it. And we definitely didn't want it to be that it was something where the university has to get involved and find an advocate. Also, we don't want this to be something that slows down the proceedings.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Thanks again. Appreciate your leadership on this.
Thank you.
There any additional questions? I would just note also that I'm trying to see the difference between what we're requiring in the statute with what UConn says, just as one example, is already their policy. Their policy says any student is entitled to be accompanied by a support person of their choice at any meeting or hearing. Do we, I imagine that those policies differ across institutions, types of institution. Do you know of any specific examples of a policy of an institution in Connecticut that doesn't permit someone being disciplined from being accompanied by a support person?
So my understanding is that no is the answer. I don't know that anybody doesn't permit. I guess I'm unaware that it is something that's kind of required that they that they have some or let them know that they are to have somebody, right? The difference in someone saying you can't have someone come in and versus we want you to have someone come in, I think is the difference.
Sure. Yeah. I guess I just didn't know if there were other examples, if there's a specific problem that you've identified somewhere in Connecticut of a policy that you think is way off base. It sounds to me like I'm pleased that the flagship institution is a policy that seems to support, with some small modifications is in compliance with the law. I just didn't know if there's an example of a particularly egregious example of a policy in Connecticut.
I can't answer that particular question. And I think what UConn has is amazing. I don't have any students at UConn. I think the big difference is, and I would ask UConn this, while that policy might be in their, student guidelines, if you will, if a student is facing disciplinary action, is the first question, do you have an advisor that you would like to be part of this moving forward? If they don't, and they're assuming that 18 to 22-year-old is thinking, I need to go and look at that handbook and find my advisor, that's never going to happen. So at the very least, we should look at the language and we should make sure that everybody has the same end goal, which is to make sure that there is no child who is, or a young adult who is going through that process by themselves because they just didn't know that they could have called their high school coach or their parent or their pastor to help them through what is probably a very difficult time. So I think that would be worth exploring.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I think that makes sense. I mean, when if we believe that having an advisor is helpful, then we'd like to make sure that every student knows that they have that policy. I'm just looking at the legislation, and I'm like, that might be an amendment to this legislation too. It doesn't require notice to every student, but I understand your response and I appreciate it. Thank you. Are there any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up is Representative Nuccio. She's joining us remotely. She'll be followed by Kelsey Schaberg, who will also be joining us remotely. Representative Nuccio.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the chairs, the ranking members, and the members of the Higher Ed Commission for allowing me to speak today. I am testifying today in support of House Bill 5427, which is expanding debt-free college to workforce development and continuing education programs. I had the distinct pleasure of going and meeting the new president of one of my alma maters, Manchester Community College, when he came on, and we had a very long, detailed conversation about the program that they had in California, which allowed the debt-free dollars to go towards workforce development and continuing education. This is something that I have a lot of belief in. I think our community college programs are amazing. They offer low-cost solutions for a lot of things, which is my number one thing that I tout to people. You can get a nursing degree at Connecticut's community colleges and not have 4 years of debt. Become a nurse, start making $65,000-$70,000 a year with a community college degree. But that got us talking to a lot of the programs that we look at now regarding workforce development, especially the manufacturing pipeline and the medical pipelines that we have, and all of the certifications that we have that allow people to do just that, to go out and start, get a certification and start working and immediately improve their situation. Currently, our debt-free policies do not allow the use of the PAC money for workforce development or continuing education. And I think this would be a good use of that money. I think opening this up to this other level of student learners would be beneficial not only to them, but to the state of Connecticut. So we could take people who are in lower wage positions. If you think of like CNAs and the lower wage nursing positions and get them into phlebotomy or into nursing or into radiology. Opening this up to them is definitely a path out of lower income jobs and into better jobs. And I think it's just overall a great idea to expand this and open it up to people who want to change jobs or get into the workforce. So I'm here in support of this bill. I'm open to any questions. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's a pretty basic bill, but I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there questions by members of the committee? Representative Bronco.
Hey, Muccio, thanks for being here and your testimony on this. I think this is a great idea and it makes a lot of sense. If we're talking about wanting to prepare our students and young people, and maybe not even young people, but prepare people for the workforce, and these programs exist, it would make sense to give the support in the same way we do to people that receive this PAC money. Question I have, and this might even be a question for research, I don't know. Do you happen to have a list of some of these programs that this would apply to that's not currently covered?
I do not. I don't have that extensive list. I think President Maduka was going to be testifying in favor of this also. And I know President Joshua Moon Johnson, who is the actual president of the Manchester Community College and a few others, was going to be testifying, I believe, or sending in testimony also with hopefully some examples. This, as you mentioned, it wouldn't be just student learners, but like anybody who wanted to change jobs and get into a better position, this would definitely be beneficial to them also. So I can get a list. I don't have it right now. I do think though it is definitely something that's worthy of exploring.
I would agree. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there. I just as we were talking, and maybe we can ask research to come up with that list. But it would be good to see these programs that would then be eligible so we can see the real impact for it. But thank you for your testimony.
You're welcome. I think it's important that we start to look at our community colleges as engines of economic growth. When we start talking about our pipelines, whether it's the healthcare pipeline or the manufacturing pipeline or any of these other programs that we have out there, the community colleges used to be really good with programming like that, and that kind of waned, and now it's back, right? It's back, and it's like they're very proudly. They have a lot of programs out there that will help people get directly into jobs. And for a while, it just kind of became the feeder for the four-year institutions, which was right at the time. But with the changes that we're seeing in regard to like especially Gen Z and that looking for opportunities outside of a four-year degree, this is a great opportunity for our community colleges to support those young adults and even older adults to kind of help them get into positions that, we know we're floundering in.
Thank you. I would just add just one thing. I spent most of my day yesterday at a meeting where we were talking about workforce Pell grants. This is a new federal program that provides workforce Pell support to students who are enrolled in programs that are anywhere from 8 to 15 weeks and lead to employment. It looks a little bit further down. You look at the event horizon of when this program is actually going to set up. It's not all too close. Technically it starts in July 1st, but there's a lot of legwork that has to be done. both at the federal government and then subsequently by state governments to qualify programs. But I think it's largely consistent with what you're suggesting here. And I think that that's a good thing. And like Representative Branco, I'd be very interested in sort of seeing, what workforce programs, workforce development programs or continuing ed programs don't already qualify for PACT. PACT, is open to anybody who's enrolled in a program leading to a degree or certificate. So I guess it would be programs that don't lead to whatever we define as a certificate that we would be talking about. And there might be a big gap there, or it might be a small gap. I'm not sure, but I think it's an interesting idea, and it's consistent with movement at the federal level as well. So I think its time might be arriving. Representative Ackert, I know that you had your hand up. I didn't know if you had a question or a thought that you wanted to share at this point.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative. Thank you for speaking in favor of this legislation. As you know, both of us are entwined in the trades and with one way or the other. But I do thank the committee, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for raising this and then actually expanding on that conversation. Sometimes we bring legislation up that may already be covered in some other area. The only concern, one of the concerns I have, well, I think let's take it. Are we focused on mostly on our Connecticut colleges here and community college? Is that what you believe, Representative Nuccio, that the focus should be?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought. Because sometimes we have, some opportunities for education outside of our colleges that are private, and I always get a little nervous about how we. Not all of them are the best stewards of our money. So things for us to keep an eye on, but I look forward to moving this legislation along and see what other areas are already funding it. So thank you for that comment, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Nuccio, for your testimony.
Thank you. I don't see any additional questions. And so thank you, Representative Nuccio, for your testimony.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Next up, also testifying remotely is Kelsey Schaberg. She'll be followed by Wynn Gadkar Wilcox, who is also remote.
Good afternoon, Representative Haddad, Senator Slapp, Representative Branco, Senator Martin, and members of the Higher Education and Employment Advancement Committee. My name is Kelsey Schaberg, and I'm a Senior Research Associate at MDRC. MDRC is a nonprofit, nonpartisan education and social policy research organization. Our researchers are dedicated to finding what works to improve the lives of low-income people. We evaluate existing programs and help develop and test new programs that are informed by research. Yesterday, I gave a presentation to the New England Board of Higher Education on what we know about how to improve the employability outcomes of students following post-secondary education. And Chair Haddad invited me to testify at this hearing today. I'm happy to be here to share the results of MDRC's research on career readiness and work experience programs. There are three main points that I want to emphasize from our research. One, there is promising evidence that work experience programs, including paid internships, are associated with positive employment and earnings outcomes for students post-graduation. Two, many students face barriers to being able to access and participate in work experience programs. And three, the design of work experience programs can influence both students' participation in these programs and their outcomes. And important design factors include compensation and flexible schedules. The existing evidence on work experience programs focuses primarily on paid internships and apprenticeships. Paid internships have been shown to be associated with higher starting salaries and more job offers for students after they graduate. And these same associations are not seen for unpaid internships. Apprenticeships have been shown to be associated with improved employment rates, but their association with earnings is not as strong. We also know that more than just offering work experience programs, the design of these programs is crucial to students being able to access them and to their longer-term success. Paid programs, including internships, can help students who face financial barriers to being able to participate. Small stipends, however, are often not enough if they do not cover all of a student's living expenses or offset lost wages that may have come from reduced work. Flexible programs that are offered on campus or in hybrid or virtual designs can help remove transportation and other scheduling barriers that students may face. Mentoring, supervision, and clear learning objectives while in the program are also important to help students build confidence and overcome self-doubt they may face in a work environment. And finally, strong ongoing employer partnerships are also key to increasing the number of opportunities out there, as well as the quality and relevance of those opportunities. So in summary, pairing post-secondary education programs with quality, structured, well-supported work experience and career coaching programs can help enhance the employability outcomes of students. It is also crucial to not just implement these strategies, but also to monitor and evaluate their outcomes to ensure they are really helping promote student success and employment. And I appreciate the opportunity to share our research with you today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony. I found, yesterday, of course, you gave a PowerPoint at a meeting I was at that lasted much longer than the 3 minutes you were just afforded. And I, in addition to inviting you to publicly testify, I hope I'd be willing to ensure that any additional material that you forward is shared with members of the committee. I was fascinated by the relationship between paid internships and improved outcomes post-graduation. And the difference is enhanced by ensuring that it's a paid internship and not an unpaid internship. That's my understanding of your research. I think you'd said something about that here. Can you tell me, is there something other than the pay that is characteristic of a paid internship versus an unpaid internship? Are there differences in quality of internship, or is it just the pay itself that yields the higher, the improvement in outcomes?
I don't think there's been great research looking at that, unfortunately. My guess is that, yes, it indicates something about the quality of the internship overall and who is offering the internship, and that it also is likely linked to who is able to access the internship and getting through the experience. But I don't think we have great research saying why the pay is necessarily important.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of drilling down a little bit, maybe too specific compared to the study you did, but thank you very much for your testimony. Do other members have a question? I see that Representative Farrar has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for joining us. Just following up, and maybe this is covered at length in the presentation that Rep. Haddad is going to send us, but just wanted to clarify, beyond the pay, I think just getting at the heart of internship programs being often the gateway in general to future success, and that if they aren't paid, you might not be able to take advantage of pursuing those internships. Is there some more data in the research that you've done to clarify, for students, how many students were unable to pursue internships because of that lack of payment to make that economically possible for them?
I can give you one example of a number. I'm trying to get it. I think this question, although it's not answering it directly. So we are doing an evaluation of a career coaching, sort of like a holistic career coaching program geared towards four-year college students. And as part of that program, one of the things that they emphasize is that all students take up an internship opportunity. In our research, though, we saw that only 70% of students out of all of them were able to apply for an internship, and only 41%, I believe it is, were able to actually participate and complete the internship. And we don't know that the reason that all of those students didn't participate necessarily was because of the pay. But in our interviews with some of the students, that was definitely the most common reason that we heard, was that students either weren't able to get a paid internship, or even when they were able to get a paid internship, a lot of them were already working and that were concerned about reducing their hours at their job or quitting their job to take on that paid experience, because they knew that once that experience ended, they would still need that financial support to be able to continue in their education. And they didn't want to risk losing their job and not being able to get it back later. I can check the research and follow up to see if we have more resources or like more of a better number, but that's the one estimate that I know offhand.
Thank you for that. And additionally, I'm not sure if your research covers capturing the actual value of the work in dollars that interns are providing in unpaid internships. I'm curious if that's something that your research has covered, because I think, that is also happening where a lot of, businesses and employers or institutions are getting this great value by having interns who are unpaid or just receiving credit. And sometimes I don't think we talk enough about that piece of that value of that work. So curious if that's captured in any of your research as well.
That has not been a focus of any of the research that we are done. So again, I'm happy to try to follow up with some resources after the hearing today.
Thank you for that. Super helpful. And just want to be grateful we're having this conversation as a young person in the state, who really could only financially seek out internship opportunities that were for credit or were paid. I know that there were many that I couldn't pursue. And I know with talking with many students today, they are in the same boat. And I will just say, as someone who is on our internship committee here in the state legislature, I am working with Representative Beach, and we're really trying to pursue getting the opportunity for financial support for the students here, because I think if we're going to take on this legislation, we need to be a model as well here at the legislature. So thank you for your time and your expertise, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. You're making legislative interns all through the building jump for joy. Senator Gedgar Wilcox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to follow up in honor of Women's History Month and all the work that my good colleague, Representative Farrar, has done for women in particular. If you can just speak to, how these paid internship opportunities in particular have created new access points for women, and if we see the numbers in terms of the demographics going up post-graduation in particular fields, if you have any kind of information on that.
Yes, that's a great question. I do think overall paid internships, right, are able to increase access and allow different types of students to access these opportunities and take advantage of them and benefit from them. I don't have that data offhand about women participating in internships, but again, could get happy to get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you. I will say that I appreciate that you're not, that you've conducted some very rigorous studies. I mean, I learned a little bit about your organization, a national organization that does work all across the country and your methodology, which is very rigorous, right? And so one of the things that I really admired about your presentations yesterday is that you offered the data and not just opinions or advocacy. Like you're really rooted in what can be demonstrated to be true based on the information that we have. And so thank you very much for your testimony. I look forward to working with you as we move forward, as we try to measure the effectiveness of many of the programs that we implement both here in Connecticut and across the country.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Wynn Gedgar Wilcox. He will be followed by Deborah Leibowitz, who's also joining us remotely.
Hello, co-chair Senator Slapp and Representative Haddad, and ranking members Senator Markin and Representative Bronco. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm speaking in opposition to Senate Bill 396, which would create 90 credit degrees, I presume bachelor's degrees, across Connecticut institutions, or it would at least allow them. I've submitted some lengthy written testimony, and so I'll just highlight a couple of things extemporaneously. First of all, this bill is inherently a bad idea. And second of all, even if you do not buy the arguments about why it's a bad idea, generally it's dangerously premature to adopt this bill now. The reasons why it's a bad idea are that it significantly, almost by definition, reduces the rigor and quality of a higher education in Connecticut. Proponents of this legislation say that they can give the same curriculum in 90 credits as 120 credits, but just mathematically, it's difficult to understand how that could possibly be true. And our experience in the few limited states that have done this, we see that the courses that are cut are general education courses or electives. And these courses are more important than they ever have been. As we emerge from the pandemic, we have college students with severe deficits in reading or in mathematics or in critical thinking, where these courses are essential. Not only that, but as the AI revolution comes to us, what we know what that's going to mean is that we need a lot of college graduates with general skills as AI scrambles accounting, nursing, liberal arts professors, professions. But those general skills are exactly what these 90 credit degrees are going to end up eliminating. Today, almost less than 50% of graduates end up having their careers in the field that they graduate in. And many of our students now will have 6 unique careers throughout their lifespan. And so to have all of their electives or general education credits eliminated does not prepare them for a future career. And finally, I just want to say that even if you don't believe that, this legislation is very premature. There are 5 other states that have this kind of legislation, and in each case, the legislation is limited to a few programs or a few universities on a pilot basis only, but this legislation has no such guardrails or restrictions. Furthermore, there's only 2 accrediting agencies, and NETCHI is one, that even allow these degrees. So what happens when a student tries to go to graduate school in an area where the accreditor has not yet approved 90 credit degrees? So in addition to it being generally a bad idea, it's also dangerously premature. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you know which 5 states currently allow?
My research indicates Maine, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Indiana, and Utah have limited programs. I may have missed one, but I know those states do, and I wasn't able to find programs currently implemented in any other states.
And you said that in those states, the number is also limited. Can you share any information?
Every single one has some kind of restriction. NETCHI has approved these as pilot programs only, is my understanding. In Utah, there's only 2 universities, Weber State and Utah Valley, that are allowed to have these programs. Other universities are not. In Massachusetts, it's limited by program, I believe. In Minnesota, it's approved on a case-by-case basis, and they have to prove that general education requirements are not affected. So there's all these restrictions in the other states that this bill doesn't contemplate.
Thank you. Do other members of the committee have questions? I see no other questions. Thank you very much for your testimony. Next up is Deborah Leibowitz. She'll be followed by James Lowe, who's here in the room.
All right. Hello. Good afternoon. As you said, my name is Deborah Leibowitz. I serve as the provost at Quinnipiac University, where we educate thousands of Connecticut students each year and prepare grads to contribute meaningfully to the state. I want to thank members of the committee for the opportunity to testify today and to express my support for Senate Bill 396. I'd like to begin by emphasizing an important point, which is that permitting 90-degree programs should not be understood as moving away from the traditional 4-year bachelor's degree. The 120 credit bachelor's degree will remain the cornerstone of an undergraduate education, and institutions like Quinnipiac, we remain deeply committed to that experience and to the intellectual breadth, the rigor, and the formative experience it provides. But higher ed is at an inflection point. And since 2011, enrollment among 18 to 24-year-olds has dropped by more than 1 million students, driving large declines in particular among young men, but not exclusively, who now make up just 44% of college students. This reflects a growing skepticism about the value, accessibility of higher education, also about the ability to pay. And so to remain competitive and relevant, we must think about many ways to be creative and broaden the pathways, to widen the funnel and adapt our models, while we maintain quality to meet students and the workforce needs. And I think the proposal before you does that. It creates an option, not a mandate, for institutions to explore carefully designed alternative degree pathways in limited and strategic circumstances. And when developed thoughtfully, I think 90 credit degree programs can reduce the cost of a degree and create a step that shortens time to degree completion, strengthening the connection between academic study, and career opportunities, particularly in fields where employers are urgently needed. I mean, skilled professionals are urgently needed. I want to make clear that as provost, I strongly support the importance of general education and don't disagree with a lot of what the previous speaker just said. General education would remain intact in any 90-degree program. And in fact, our accrediting body, NECHI, requires that. These programs would continue to cultivate the core competencies we expect of all Quinnipiac graduates, including critical thinking, problem solving, creative inquiry, but they're intended as a complement, not to devalue our traditional four-year degree programs, which will remain essential. At the same time, we have to, as we acknowledge the realities facing today's students, I think a more modular approach to higher education could be desirable, where we are creating paths in and paths out of a credential. And it will, I think for many, timely entry into the workforce is a necessity, not a preference. So across the country, policymakers and accreditors colleges, as you've heard, are already exploring or have these degrees. And I would add to the list of 5, Rhode Island and New Hampshire are already also offering these degrees. And they're often referred to, our accreditor also requires them to have a different name. So it can't be a bachelor's degree. Many are referred to as an applied bachelor's degree. And that they typically concentrate in areas of strong workforce demand. So I think at Quinnipiac, any exploration of reduced credit programs would only proceed if several conditions were met. First, these degrees have to involve intentional curricular redesign, not a simple compression of a 4-year program. They have to be different. And they have to be supported by strong faculty governance, clear learning outcomes, integrated experiential learning, and meaningful assessment, also which is explicitly required by our accreditor. Second, the programs should align with workforce needs, particularly in sectors where employees are seeking talent and accelerated pathways and where you can collaborate to do that. Then also, the third, transparency for students is essential, including clear communication about how the credential may relate to graduate education, professional licensure, or future academic pathways, making clear that it is not a bachelor's degree. And I will also say that NECHI, our accrediting body, also requires that. And finally, it requires a path from 90 credits to 120. So if you want, in some ways you can think about this as modularizing the steps between a community college degree, a 90 credit degree, and a 120 credit bachelor's degree. And we're required to have that transparency. So without this flexibility, Connecticut risks falling behind and being deaf to the needs to create multiple pathways to higher learning. At a time when that is ever more important. And as I've said, Quinnipiac, we would approach such program carefully, we would design it intentionally, and we would only launch with tremendous thought and in close partnership with all of the folks I have talked about previously. So for these reasons, I respectfully urge you to support the bill. Thanks for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator Slapp has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for your testimony and your time today. I'm wondering, how familiar are you with the other states that have laws on the books regarding the 90 credit hours?
I am not an expert on their laws.
Okay, yeah, I mean, part of the reason I ask is because the speaker before raised a good point in terms of the restrictions, the rather, limited scope that those laws have compared to the language before us now, which is, it's 11 lines total. It's there's not a lot to it. It basically says you can do it. And so as you look at it, do you think that there might be some restrictions that might make sense that like our earlier speaker had discussed, pilot programs, things like that? Or do you think, do you think that approach might be more prudent than just, letting all the schools kind of go at it?
Yeah, I actually think one way to go at that is to pull the requirements that our accreditation body is currently putting on around this, NECHI, and to just put some of those into the legislation, because I don't think those are inherently problematic. We should, if we're going to do this, we need to make clear it's a different degree. We need to be transparent with potential enrollees in those programs. We need to be clear where there may be limitations, for instance, of whether or not you could use that degree in order to transfer to graduate or professional studies. We should be required to have a pathway, as I was thinking about it very modularly, where you go from 90 credits, then what would be the path to get a bachelor's degree at 120? We should be required, I think, to assess what we do and to preserve the kind of base of general education. And our accreditor does, so in none of us who are going to go through NECHI accreditation could actually get it passed without that. But I don't think that mirroring some of those things in the Connecticut legislation would be necessarily problematic.
Okay, and let me ask you, this is kind of a combination of a few questions that I've received, or concerns too, that I've received from constituents who are professors, and you're probably hearing it from faculty members, I would assume. If you haven't, you probably will at a Quinnipiac. So, some of these are kind of tough, but I'm going to fire off a few at you and love for your response. You touched on this one a little bit. How will the 90 credit degree impact students who want to go to grad school, law, med school, PhD, et cetera? Right? I think you touched a little bit on that. How will, and this isn't you specifically, but this is to a school in general, handle the hit to the university's reputation when the more elite schools, especially in Connecticut, Yale, Wesley, and Trinity, would never do this? Another question is, what do you say to those who see the four-year degree as the basis of our competitiveness internationally and the reason why so many people want to come to the U.S. for higher education? Another concern I'm hearing is from a constituent, study abroad, internships, senior capstones, all will take a hit, and these are all nationally recognized high-impact practices. And then the last one is, the feeling is that this seems like another hit to the liberal arts, humanities, and gen eds. Isn't this just a race to the bottom? Sorry to hit you with all those, but
all right, no problem. I'll see if I can do them justice. I think it's true that some elite schools, not every school is going to engage in this, and I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I think that different, and we wouldn't do it to replace what we already do for the majority of our students. But I do think there are particular areas of workforce need and demand, and perhaps outreach to new populations of learners where it would make sense for us. And so I don't think it's a problem if not everyone is doing the same thing. I think that that's not necessarily bad. And while it is true that the 120 credit degree has been the cornerstone of higher ed in undergraduate higher ed in the United States. I think we see that many people leave school before they finish. That is not a problem we predominantly have at Quinnipiac, but I think there are populations of learners that often do that. And I think it is incumbent on us to think about access pathways more creatively and to create steps where people perhaps can come in and come out and not leave without a degree. And so I think about it very much as, you know, you have a 2-year degree, you have a 90 credit pathway that might be appropriate for some things, and you have bachelor's degrees that are more appropriate for others. And can we create ways so that learners can engage in those systems flexibly? I think on high impact practices, one of the things in just some, that I've heard around this has been, can you think about, because high impact practices, as the previous speaker who was talking about internships and the research there is critically important to student success. And I do think it's possible that because there's something you can't do in the 90 credits that you're going to do in the 120 credits. And it is possible, although not necessary, that there is less experiential learning for sure in a 90 credit program. But maybe the next step, or working with an employer, part of what you're doing is allowing some of that credit for experiential learning to help complete to the next step of a degree. I think it really depends on what the program is and who the target learners are for that, and how you're working with employers in order to support those students. And then lastly, I would say that I don't disagree at all about, and I think there's no question that we see that the need to help students figure out how to develop those core human literacies, that core transferable skills that will differentiate them from what AI can do, has never been more important. And that as institutions of higher ed, we should have to, this is, I know already in the bill, I believe, a pilot project, and that we should be accountable to outcomes. And so we should assess what we're doing. And from my perspective, we have to continue to hold the liberal arts core of these degrees, because it will help us develop in our grads those skills that are most needed in the workplace.
Thank you very much for your answers.
And actually, I think it's the pilot via NECHI, not the pilot via this bill, just to be clear.
Senator Gadkar Wilcox.
Hi there, Deb. Nice to see you.
Hi, Sujata.
I wanted to ask you a question about a different bill, actually, just to get your perspective on it, on Senate Bill 428 about research, and also in celebration of Women's History Month, given that I know the research on women's and gender studies has been a big part of what you have done as a faculty member, and how significant research is to us in the classroom and then to universities in general. What more can we be doing as a state to be intentional about supporting research and to invest in research? So I just wanted to get your thoughts on Senate Bill 428 about research and what other investments we can be making.
Yeah, and I heard your question there and the presentation there. I agree, with the gist of the speaker from UConn about how important research is. It is fundamental to our faculty's engagement in knowledge creation, in learning, and a dramatically important way to bring students in and to let them apply what they're learning, and to think about the problems that exist in the world and how they want to use their knowledge in order to help make things to help improve. So I think it's fundamental to the teacher scholar model that is what most of our institutions in the state are based upon. I think in terms of what other things the state could do, I would suggest that more support for research in the state, and might think about that, especially in areas where there are real needs in communities that we can help fill. I think about that in areas where, for instance, at Quinnipiac, we are very strong in and have engaged with, as you have, community partners in helping them to kind of improve or address issues that are faced in the community. And I think extra funding there and a recognition of the way in which the funding landscape has gotten harder is really important. I think I got all the points that you asked about.
Thank you, Devin. Nice to see you again.
You too.
Representative Farrar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for joining us. A couple of follow-up questions. I know you mentioned, for Quinnipiac, if this was something you would pursue, it would be for some very specific degree programs.
Yeah.
Could you give examples of what those might be if this was something that was offered as a pilot opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, any such program has to go through our process and would, and so given that we haven't done that, I don't want to make any commitments to anything, but I think that there are, one area where we're particularly strong, again, or where there's alignment in workforce needs, and we've been innovating in all kinds of ways, working with employers, is in the healthcare sector, or in technology or science related areas. And I think that this is a place where thinking creatively about this is a step, and then what does an employer need, and how we can bring both more people into the pipeline and also partner with employers in the state to actually help students move through that entire continuum of what I'm articulating in this kind of modular way of a 2-year degree, a 90 credit degree, potentially, and then a bachelor's degree. I think that would be really important. So I see a lot of possibilities for us in the area of healthcare. And I'll tell you, interestingly, there's also some examples of it, ironically, where that no one thinks about already exist. So, for instance, the American Bar Association, as here, Professor Godcar Wilcox knows well, given her area of expertise. The ABA allows 3-year students who have had 3 years of bachelor studies who are enrolled from the outset. And we have one of these programs into our own law school where students do 90 credits of study at the undergraduate level. And actually, they're sort of given reverse transfer credit after their first year of law school. Of course, they still have 2 more years of law school, so they still have significant separate, enough separate credits. But that is one example of actually a 3-year bachelor's degree. We don't call it that, but it is 3 years of undergraduate study combined with the graduate degree. And I do think there are opportunities in that kind of space as well, where it makes sense and where it would work with ultimate professional licensure.
Thank you for giving that example. Very helpful. And then kind of speaking to, I think at the outset, you're saying, for students, trying to meet students, where they are, what they're looking for, how that matches, the career they want to pursue, but also their financial abilities and constraints. And I just was wondering for the institution, how much the opportunities, or is there, more interest do you see over time in students being part-time students? And is that a piece of much more needed flexibility? Obviously, at the state level, we're much more familiar with part-time students at our community colleges, but I was wondering how that fits in to the offerings of an institution like Quinnipiac, and if there's more opportunity there, in addition to, again, the proposal that's in front of us.
Yeah. I think what you've said is exactly right. It really depends on not so much in this case, the degree program, but rather the population of learners that you're trying to tailor your options to. And so most of our traditional undergraduates are, would not opt to go part-time. They're opting to go full-time for 3 to 4 years and to finish their degrees. And so I think in most cases, no, that's not something we need, but I think in places in the workforce, and in programs that are directly linked to workforce needs and licensure, there are examples, and we have examples where people go part-time, because the folks who are in those degree programs are going to be people who already are in for instance, they are teachers and they are upskilling, or in other areas, and they're doing the same. So I think there is the need, absolutely, for part-time options, depending on the who's being targeted in the program.
Thank you. Thank you for highlighting that in the spectrum of needs. And also, again, that is often a good option for folks that are, keeping that connection to the workforce while they're going to school.
Yeah, I would say it's critical, not just important.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And thank you for your testimony. I don't see any additional questions.
All right, thank you very much.
So we'll move on to James Lowe, followed by Andrea Collegy. I see you're bringing up Aaron Peterson as well. He's number 10 on the list. I'll give you a little extra time, but not a full extra 3 minutes. Why don't you go? And we'll see where the question and answer ends up.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Honorable chairs, ranking members, and members of the Higher Education and Employment Advancement Committee. My name is Jim Lowe, and I am the Associate Vice President and Executive Director for the Center for Career Readiness at the University of Connecticut. I'm here with my colleague, Aaron Peterson, who heads up UConn's WorkPlus program. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on behalf of the university in support of House Bill 5478 and acts supporting Learn and Earn internship opportunities. UConn strongly supports the bill's overarching goals. Connecticut faces a clear workforce gap, with only 11% of employers believing recent graduates possess the skills necessary to be effective in the workplace. The students from lower income backgrounds, 43% of whom work during the academic year, are disproportionately shut out of paid internships due to transportation, geography, financial necessity, and other reasons. So we'll get back to the paid versus unpaid, which I know is a conversation from previous testimony. The bill directly addresses these barriers by helping small businesses, those with 50 or fewer employees, create high-quality paid internships, providing stipends to Pell-eligible students, establishing a statewide quality seal for internships, requiring transparent reporting on internship attendance, completion, and results, and extending the human capital investment tax credit to salaries paid to interns. These are smart, equity-focused, pro-business measures that will help keep talent in Connecticut and strengthen the state's economy. UConn is already demonstrating what Learn and Earn can look like. Our WorkPlus program turns existing paid campus student employment into structured workforce development. So there's been a potential data breach. So excitement. Anyway, So we were talking about the Work Plus program that turns existing paid campus student employment into structured workforce development. Supervisors are trained to intentionally build student skills aligned with the same National Association of Colleges and Employers career readiness competencies referenced in this bill. Students complete goal setting and reflection checkpoints, and everything happens within the regular paid hours, so no additional cost to the student or the university. We currently serve 560 working learners on campuses across the state and have the scalable infrastructure to reach all 6,000 student employees system-wide. After engaging in the Work Plus program for just a single semester, students indicated that their supervisor encouraged their professional development and were interested in supporting their career goals at a rate of 20 percentage points higher than before they began the program. Additionally, these same students showed a 40 percentage point increase when surveyed about their knowledge of NACE core competencies and career readiness. Work Plus provides that proves that paid structured experiences improve persistence, degree completion, and immediate postgraduate employability while advancing equity for first-generation and low-income students who cannot afford unpaid internships. The bill's tax credit expansions, the Quality Seal framework, and the Pell Stipend program are particularly welcome and will amplify the impact of programs like Work Plus. The one thing I ask that you please be aware is that UConn does not currently have the resources within its available appropriations to implement a new statewide program outlined in Section 1B of the legislation to train small businesses in internship management. As the legislative session continues, we look forward to working with the committee to either identify new funding or come up with alternative options. UConn is ready to partner fully with our sister institutions, the Chief Workforce Officer, small businesses, this committee, among others, to turn the vision of Learn and Earn into a reality. Work Plus already shows what is possible when paid employment is paired with intentional skill development. With the resources to extend that model to small employers, this bill can transform opportunity for thousands of Connecticut students and strengthen our state's workforce pipeline for decades to come. Thank you for your time and leadership. I'm happy to answer any questions or provide additional detail on Work Plus or the bill's implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know Aaron Peterson is next to you. Did you have any additional comments, and then you can field questions together?
I'm just here to answer any questions.
Great. Okay, good. I'm intrigued by one thing that you said around the scalability of your Work Plus program. You know, one of the things that I'm interested in doing is just increasing the number of paid internship opportunities that are available across Connecticut. And the upside potential here is actually pretty big. I mean, you currently work with 560 working learners, and you feel like you could go to as high as 6,000.
Right.
Are there barriers for you to be able to scale to that degree?
Yeah, so the biggest barrier to scale to that degree would be the actual resource of people to run the program. So currently the program is structured as a pilot. We started with 250 students in the first year, scaled it up to 560 students, and that's all being currently run by Aaron. In order to continue to grow that, when we say we have the infrastructure, we have the training tools, we have the website, we have all the underpinnings, but a program like this requires human capital to expand it, and that's the piece that we're missing right now.
And so you said the 560 are run by Aaron. Do you need I can't do the math in my head that quickly. You need 7 more Aarons to scale to 6,000?
I don't know what I would do with 7 more Aarons, but no. So what we were looking at as a structure would be Aaron running the program as he currently does, with one person supporting him on the supervisor side to do supervisor training, tracking supervisor adherence, and all those other types of things. One on the student side, because there is student training and tracking required through the program itself, and then one administrator. So a team of 4 addressing the needs of those 6,000, transitioning them from simply paid jobs on campus to paid internships with identifiable and recognizable outcomes that tie into the NACE's 8 core competencies.
Right, and we had a conversation earlier, and I'm happy to notice that I listen, and it built in the 8 core competencies, NACE core competencies into the bill. And those core competencies and measuring those and being sure that we're attentive to those competencies are what distinguish an internship from a quality internship.
So in my mind, yes. So I go back and I was very encouraged to hear the provost of Quinnipiac talk about the employer's perspective, because those 8 core competencies were developed by employers. So that's what the employment community is saying they're looking for in student talent. I think even when you talk about this 90 credit program, it's like, have we talked to employers and said, what would you think of this? Like if you saw 3 students, one was an associate's, one was a 90 credit, and one was a full bachelor's degree, what would you hire those types of students for into your organizations before we start moving forward with changing things? So I'm all about taking a look at, on the onset, what is the program's aim, goal, and potential outcome, and then talking with our employer community and saying, is that valuable to you? So employers are saying right now that, so if you surveyed them 10, 15 years ago, they'd be talking about degree program and GPA. Today, they're talking about experiential learning. And the capstone of experiential learning is an internship. And there are significant differences other than just pay between a paid and an unpaid internship. So, like I would equate it to going into a store and there's a table of freebies up in the front. Anybody can take one, or you have to buy something. Let's talk about the quality between those two things, the intentionality of it, the amount of time that the employer puts into it, knowing that they're not paying for something, they're just getting something for free. And the National Association of Colleges Employers launched a campaign about 1.5 years ago, nationwide media campaign around paid internships and the value of paid internships. And they do have quite a bit of research supporting that it's not only the pay piece, it's the quality of the internship itself. That's why when we were initially approached through this Gallup Strata grant with the University of Arizona to take a look at WorkPlus, it was particularly appealing to us at UConn because we knew that we had these 6,000 students working on campus. And quite honestly, a lot of them are in jobs that really are supporting those 8 core competencies, but many are not and should be. So can we look to those positions and say, you know what, those students don't necessarily have the opportunity to go off campus to engage in an internship. Can we create those internship experiences right on campus so that students can do them as co-curricular or extracurricular activities along with their coursework?
Thank you. And can you speak to student expectations prior to entering to your WorkPlus program and what they've, what their reaction is after they complete the program? I'm just interested in knowing from a student, you're not students, I know, but you might have greater insight than I do about
Right.
what do students, how are they feeling about the program? Are they getting out of it what they expected to get out of it?
So in short, yes, they are getting out of it what they expected to get out of it. We do survey students pre-program and post-program. Since it's a new program, we had the luxury of surveying students who were in jobs before and who are now in WorkPlus. So I'll turn that over to Aaron as he works with this intimately and actually engages with students. One other thing that you should be aware is before we even launched into the WorkPlus program, we spent 2 entire days off-site doing focus groups with both students and employers on campus. And that helped us intentionally develop some of the components of the program to specifically address the needs that students were saying, I have a job on campus, but it's not meaningful because of. Those things have been built into the program to address those concerns. But in terms of the actual student feedback, Aaron can speak to that.
Yeah, sure. So we do measure pretty much everything in our program, and we are measuring students who are not in WorkPlus positions against students who are in WorkPlus positions through surveys, but also in observing kind of what they're completing and what they're responding to. And we get feedback both from students and from supervisors about what the experience has been thus far. Now, we are in a pilot program. We've made a lot of adaptations based on that feedback, but by and large, we have learned that students feel more valued in their experiences because their supervisors are They care about their career development. They care about what they're doing after they graduate, and they're helping them identify and build skills that they might not see right away that, it correlates. A student that might be working at the rec center who might be swiping ID cards or something might not recognize that they're building problem-solving skills and communication skills and things along the way. And their supervisors are there to kind of help remind them that, set goals around that, and then help them articulate that at the end of the experience. So in addition to getting feedback from students, which has been overwhelmingly positive, we also see those responses from students who are articulating what they've gained throughout their campus employment in ways that other students who haven't been exposed to Work Plus are unable to do just based on awareness alone.
You sort of anticipated my next question, which is, so you have students on campus who are participating in on-campus jobs. Then there are others that are doing these Work Plus experiences. And I was wondering, how do they share the difference in those experiences to potential employers after they graduate? Like, what are there specific words that they use? Is there a credential or a transcript notation that they earn? How do they demonstrate that they've participated in this experience and it's enhanced as opposed to a different sort
No,
of
so
experience?
that's a great question. Thank you for that. We're working very hard to advocate for supervisors and students that this program is both different and real and important. So we're still shaping what the narrative looks like as far as, do you put something on LinkedIn that specifically mentions Work Plus or not? But what I will say, regardless of whether it's branded Work Plus or not, which an employer might not know what that is at this point, something that's very intentionally built into the program is that at the end of the student's employment experience, at least annually, that student comes up with an artifact. Most of the time, it's an artifact that would be like a resume bullet point or a way to talk about the experience with an employer. And it's structured and guided for them so that so it's easy for the supervisor to do that with the student, and it's easy for the student to do it kind of on their own. And so whether it's Work Plus or not, the important thing is that at the end of their experience, we want them to be able to talk about it and identify those skills that they built and why they're important for the employer.
And I think that goes in large part to the intentionality of the program, that a student can say, I was an intern as opposed to I worked an on-campus job. And it's all well and good to say I was an intern versus I worked in an on-campus job. But if you don't have those bullet points to articulate your value proposition to a potential employer, and that's a lot of what we're doing through this program, is number one, giving them the skill, helping them build the skill, and then giving them the language to translate that skill into a workplace through their experiential learning opportunity. The other thing that is kind of an offshoot, and it doesn't really have to do with the employability piece of the Work Plus program, is that all the data and studies show that students persist to graduation at a higher rate if they feel that somebody cared about them, somebody cared about helping them achieve their goals, somebody worked with them on skill building and goal achievement. So not only are we taking a look at how do we build their skills in those 8 core competencies, but how do we ensure that they persist to graduation at a rate of their peers or one that exceeds that? So that's kind of a offshoot benefit of it, but something that we're very conscious of.
Thank you. Are there other questions? I see Representative Farrar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, thanks for being here again. A couple questions. In regards to Work Plus, did I hear correctly that you had identified funding for this program, and therefore are you able to grow this program or continue it year after year, or where's the university in regards to maintaining this?
So we have initial funding for the pilot.
Okay.
The Work Plus program is built into the university's strategic plan, as well as the university's strategic enrollment management plan, specifically mentioned in both of those plans. So we're at a point right now where we're addressing the funding issue. We do also have at least 3 employers in the state now who are supporting us financially to continue to build the program, one in a very significant way that will soon allow us to hire another individual to support the program. The other 2 employers, to a lesser extent, but still very valuable in terms of partnership with us on that. But again, to roll this program out to all 6,000 students, we would need more investment from the university. And our conversations have been such that everybody's supportive of it. We're just not at a point where we've gotten through the initial 2 pilot phases of it to a point where we'll roll it out. I don't ever see rolling out a program like this going from 560 students to 6,000 students in one semester. So we would probably grow to 1,000 to 1,500, then to 3,000. I also don't, I tend to be more of a realist, don't think we'll ever be at a point where all 6,000 students who work on campus will be engaged in this program. There are some jobs on campus that just don't lend itself to the underpinnings and structure and rigor of a program like Work Plus. But I would say that we would probably level out somewhere north of 4,000 students in the program itself.
And are you aware of any other institutions in the state that have a similar model to their on-campus work experiences for students?
Not within the state.
Okay.
So this really came out of, unless you're aware of anybody in the state who's engaged in a program like this, Aaron?
I've been meeting with some folks from Central who are interested in scaling up their Work Plus program. So, but it is part of a larger national initiative, which I think, Jim, you were just about to talk about. But there certainly is growing interest in the state as well for more Work Plus type experiences.
UConn was part of the initial national cohort of 8 institutions. I think it was. Arizona State was the first one to launch it. They then got additional funding from Strata Gallup to expand it, and invited, I think it was 8 other institutions. We went out to Arizona. We learned from their program. They're about 6 years into their program right now, so they're about 4 years ahead of us. So we continue to learn from them, and we're actually in conversation with the other 8 nationally who are actually in the same spot we're at in terms of developing the program itself.
Okay, very helpful. And I appreciate all the info on this because, as I think the good chair was noting, you know, these experiences, you know, are those high quality learning environments, just very similar to, you know, other experiential learning that we might want for students as they graduate. But for UConn in particular, do you have data on the percentage of students who graduate who do have an experiential learning component to their time at UConn or an internship? Is that data that the school is capturing?
Yes, we capture that through our first destination reporting, and that's publicly articulated on our website. So if you go to careers.uconn.edu and look at outcomes, you'll see all the information about where students placed, total number of students placed, how many of them had internships. We can also do customized reporting broken down by ethnicity, in-state versus out-of-state. So yeah, we track that very intentionally and look at that on an annual basis. Again, based on NACE's nationally accepted protocols of reporting, but that's something we continue to look at.
That's helpful because I think us having a great sense of that again across the state and seeing again where those gaps are about what students, you know, might not again be able to access those opportunities
Right.
is critical.
Yeah, and I think the thing regarding like paid versus unpaid internship is you really have to look at minoritized student populations as well as students on Pell Grant. They cannot afford to engage in an unpaid internship. Even if it were Work Plus on steroids, all the bells and whistles, all the they just don't have access to it from a financial standpoint. So I think that's a big piece of it. I think the other big piece of it that we take a look at, particularly at UConn stores, not so much in Stanford, Waterbury, or Hartford, is that there aren't employers within striking distance of our store's campus. So I talk to my colleague at NYU all the time, and she doesn't get the concept of Work Plus because they walk out the door and there are hundreds of employers for internships within 3 or 4 blocks. So it's a creative way for us to create those outside of classroom or extracurricular, co-curricular activities right on campus to replicate a true employment situation in any company out there that, again, to Aaron's point, the students would have the language and the experience to back that up in interviews, in, you know, other experiences, or even summer internships from that standpoint.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I just want to give a quick shout out. Well, I was at UConn. I feel like I had a Work Plus internship because I had the beauty of working for Career Services, which, as you can imagine, they wanted to make sure you had a great experience. So I appreciate you highlighting how this can ring true for so many other students at UConn. So thank you.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions from members of the committee? Let's see them. I see none. So thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you for having us.
Andrea Collegy, followed by Danielle Cloud. Yeah, one of those last names that could be pronounced a number of different ways.
Callaghy.
Callaghy,
Yeah.
welcome to the committee.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, senators, representatives, and members of the Connecticut General Assembly Higher Education Committee for the opportunity to share my story and those that will be shared via Zoom and written testimony of this life-saving bill before you. My name is Andrea Callaghy. I live in Darien, Connecticut for the past 19 years, raising 4 children, ages 20, 18, 16, and 12. I'm here to testify in support of Bill 5426, which has been framed after Katie Myers Law, signed into law by Governor Newsom in September of 2024. As the mother of 4 children, 2 of which are now in college, it's truly shocking and unnerving the true launch any student faces when leaving for college. I speak to you as a mother whose child contemplated suicide for over a year, experienced multiple hospitalizations, and a 10-week residential care program at the age of 12. After 8 years of living a very difficult journey of healing and recovery, this same child is now thriving as a sophomore in college. Having experienced significant mental health challenges in his past, the lack of any safety net while at college has been terrifying. His proximity to home and our almost daily touch bases serve as his safety net. That being said, the stress and expectations college students face are often real and often overwhelming. An acute crisis stress reaction can happen to any child, regardless of any past mental health concerns. These children deserve to be protected and given the opportunity to have an adult they trust outside the university or college help guide them and support them when faced with the threat of a disciplinary action. Some of the most at-risk students are those high-achieving students and student athletes who previously have only known success. For such a student to receive and face a disciplinary notice without the support of a trusted advisor has the possibility of turning to devastation. Every student deserves a safety net. I feel blessed to sit here before you knowing that my child is thriving in college. What you consider before you today will have life-altering implications. I respectfully encourage you to please honor the lives lost and make a change to save the lives of future children. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony. 4 kids, 20, 18, 16, and 12. That's a lot of work. I just have a 12-year-old.
You're lucky.
Do members of the committee have questions? Representative Branco.
Thank you for coming today and sharing your story and testimony. I'm wondering, with the college that your child is at now,
Yes.
do you know of a policy like this, or do you know if there were to be a proceeding, what their access to an advisor would be?
I don't know specifically. I can easily follow up with that information. I do know they have an incredible mental health and wellness program there that does offer support for students. However, my student in particular did receive not disciplinary action, but academic probation, which we were not made aware of until after the notification went through. Thankfully, given what we've lived through, we have a very close and a very close relationship, and he felt safe enough to share that information with us. That being said, I feel pretty confident that had he not gone through what he went through and lived through what he lived through, a letter of that magnitude, which we then received as parents, is very, very overwhelming and can be perceived as incredibly threatening, even when it can be as a benign as a notification of an academic or a disciplinary probation.
Thank you. And I'm wondering, if a scenario arose, if an advisor isn't pre-selected, would it be up to the child to pick an advisor? Like, what would stop a child from just not saying anything versus an advisor being kind of pre-approved, or does that make a difference to you?
I don't know if that makes a difference. I will say though, without having a process in place that they've already selected someone that should something happen, this is who they feel safe going to. I can only speak from the vantage point of my child, knowing that if he were to undergo such a disciplinary action and didn't feel safe coming to us, that could have been a very devastating event.
Because I think the way this is written, it would not spell out requiring it
No.
beforehand.
No.
So I'm wondering if that's something that we should discuss or consider to avoid a situation of something happening and a student in that instance being too scared to reach out to their advisor.
Well, they will, and to be quite honest, these students, many of whom are the most at risk, are the high achieving students that have only known perfection to this point. And the same for the athletes. They haven't experienced any level of rejection or disappointment in many cases to the degree that something like this would imply. So I do feel very strongly that a child should have the opportunity both to opt in and also when they receive some sort of notification that they are then again advised that they could have an advisor, brought in with them, whether it's a parent, whether it's an aunt, whether it's a coach, whether it's a pastor. Again, it's having that person that they can turn to so they know they're not alone facing disciplinary action.
Yeah, I think those are good points and maybe things we could further discuss when we bring this back up in committee. But again, thank you for sharing your story today.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Next up, Daniel Clad.
Good afternoon, Senator Slapp, Representative Haddad, Representative Bronco, Senator Martin, and other distinguished members of the Higher Education and Employment Advancement Committee. My name is Danielle Cloud. I'm a policy director for the Connecticut Business and Industry Association, otherwise known as CBIA. CBIA represents thousands of member companies ranging in size and industry, with 90% of our members being small businesses with less than 100 employees. Today, I am testifying in support of House Bill 5478, which expands access to high-quality learn and earn internships opportunities. Internships are essential to strengthening the connection between education and the workforce. They give students hands-on experiences and exposure to career pathways, while also helping employers build talent pipelines and introduce young people to opportunities available here in Connecticut. We especially appreciate that this bill recognizes the needs of small businesses. Many small employers want to host interns, but they may not have the bandwidth to design structured quality programs. The training and technical assistance offered in this bill will make internships more accessible and more meaningful for students. We also appreciate the bill's recognition that financial barriers can prevent students from participating in internships. So by providing stipends to Pell Grant recipients, it helps address other out-of-pocket expenses that come with internships, and it ensures that they can still pursue these opportunities. We do, however, offer one suggestion related to the tax credit in Section 5, which expands the human capital investment tax credit to include intern wages. While this is an important step, the credit as currently structured can only be used by corporations. Many Connecticut small businesses operate as pass-through entities, so LLCs, S-corps, and partnerships, and they would not be eligible to use this tax credit. So with that, we would encourage that the committee consider adding a provision that allows pass-through entities to claim a similar credit for wages paid to interns as well. There are good models already in front of the legislature, like House Bill 5319 in Commerce and House Bill 6884 in front of this committee last session. They extend existing credits to pass-through businesses, like the small businesses that I mentioned. These bills outline things like eligibility definitions, income thresholds, and guardrails that could be mirrored here to ensure that the incentive that I'm talking about is fiscally responsible and accessible to small employers we want to encourage. Together, the tax credit and the technical assistance would give small businesses both the support and the financial incentive to create strong internship programs. I would also like to note that I submitted written testimony with more details into this, and we appreciate the committee's work on this bill and would be happy to serve as a resource as you continue to refine the language. Thank you again for your time, and we respectfully urge your support for House Bill 5478, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony. We've talked a little bit about the expanding the tax credit portion to additional kinds of businesses, and that sounds like a reasonable position for to take. I don't serve in the Finance Committee, so it's easy for me to send it there. We'll see what we can get through the Finance Committee. One question though I did have around the training. I mean, it is a real challenge for small businesses who don't have, dedicated HR departments and don't have a lot of other resources to put together quality internships like we were discussing with what UConn is doing and other sort of larger corporations can do. Have there been efforts for industry associations or chambers of commerce, workforce investment boards to provide assistance to small and medium businesses who are interested in taking advantage of the opportunity to take advantage of interns, and do they have a role in this? Could they have a role in this as well?
In my position representing CBIA, we are looking at ways that small employers, which is majority of our membership, can take advantage of opportunities like this. We understand that they work within small margins, so being able to offer them something similar to this is really important for us. That way that they can not only offer internship opportunities, but be able to expand their business and tap into workforce talent pipelines through internships.
Great. I mean, I guess that's something that I'll think about moving forward. And is it safe to say that a primary concern of many of your members is our workforce concerns in the future? I know that there's some defense-related industries in Connecticut that are growing. They anticipate growing the number of employees they need, and I hear anecdotally, but I'm just concerned with what you hear about whether or not people feel confident, whether companies in Connecticut feel confident that they'll be able to meet their workforce needs, and how do paid internships factor into their ability to meet those demands?
Recruitment and retainment are continued things that employers cite as issues. Just being able to fill the open positions has been hard. Internships, on the other hand, they're a huge indicator of being able to hire someone full-time in the long run. When you have an internship program, you're able to identify and develop talent, and that transitions into being able to fill those open positions in the long run. So that's why we're so appreciative of this bill and the language included in it, especially its acknowledgement of the needs of small businesses when it comes into tapping into internship opportunities.
Yeah, we focused earlier about the benefits to the students for taking interns, but it seems to me that for employers who are offering internships, it's really an extended interview process, right? Like they get very familiar with somebody who's earning the credential that they will eventually need someone to fill a permanent full-time job with, gives them a bench to go to fill jobs. Are there any additional questions? I see Representative Farrar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, thanks for joining us. And I apologize if I missed this since I missed your testimony. But does CBI have a sense amongst your membership what percentage of your companies have or are interested in having interns?
I'd be happy to get the specific details of that to you, but there is an interest for smaller employers who start having more quality internships for them because they see the benefit in terms of workforce. And I think that by having some of the things included in this bill, like the tax credit and like having the technical and training programs, you'll be able to push small businesses that are on the fence about having an internship program over into actually exploring it and implementing it themselves.
Thank you. Yeah, and if you have, again, any data or if it's something you all could include in a survey moving forward, I feel like that would be helpful to our efforts here. I know as someone who ran a nonprofit here in the state, our budget was always in a circumstance where we regularly couldn't pay our interns at the level we wanted to. And as you said, I know for many small businesses, that's still the case. So any information you can be providing us that are the barriers, and if that aligns with this work, that would be super helpful. So thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I'd
Dr.
be more than happy to serve as a resource and send that information to you. And that's why we wanted to make sure that we made the committee aware of possibly exploring a tax credit for small businesses, looking at pass-through entities and having something similar to the tax credit that's already mentioned in the bill and extending it to businesses that are not corporations. That way they can actually afford to hire interns and continue hiring interns in the future.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions? Senator Slapp.
Just want to say you did a great job, and I have a message from your uncle, Chris, who said that as well. So that's all. But thank you for your testimony.
Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, Uncle Chris. Now I get it.
You didn't recognize the last names? There's not many.
Well, I
names in
just didn't realize
Connecticut.
the connection. I sat next to Chris when we both worked together here 25 years ago. So they're good. Thank you. Thank you. Any additional questions? Seeing none? We're good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next up is Drew Michael McWeeny, followed by Kimberly Beardsley Carr.
There we go. It's on. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Drew Michael McQueen. I'm an assistant professor of early childhood education and program chairperson of the early childhood department over at CT State Norwalk Community College. I'd like to talk in support of two bills. First is 428, an act concerning research funding at institutions of higher education. While this bill is a positive step in prioritizing the generation of new knowledge to further understand our society and all of its intricacies, I believe it needs to be amended to include a representative from the community college, so the commission reflects the full spectrum of higher education institutions in Connecticut. Without a representative from a community college, the state is not recognizing that community colleges are legit higher education. And the absence of community colleges creates an incomplete representation of higher education in the state. Community colleges serve a large portion of Connecticut's student population and are deeply connected to the local workforce, applied research, and community-based initiatives. Community colleges frequently collaborate with industry partners, local governments, and workforce programs. They're on the front lines identifying emerging workforce needs and placing students in roles that directly impact local economies. Including a community college faculty representative would ensure that this study benefits from perspectives grounded in the workforce education, regional economic needs, and things that directly impact local communities. It'll also help figure out how to distribute funding equitably and strategically. I know for a fact that some people will say that research activity is concentrated primarily at large research universities, and that representation should therefore remain limited to those institutions. And while it's true, I think that argument kind of fails because it diminishes the evolving role and purpose of community colleges and workforce development. And I don't think it would diminish the study's expertise. It would instead broaden it and ensure that the state's research investments reflect the needs of all sectors of higher education. And then the other bill that I'd like to support is 396, an act permitting 90 credit degree programs at institutions of higher education in the state. I'm very excited for this bill because I believe it's a healthy balance between the 60 credits needed for an associate's degree and the 120 credits needed for a bachelor's degree. And I'm going to use early childhood education, which is my field, to kind of illustrate a point, which is a field that's tied directly to workforce needs. The traditional 120 credit model forces students to take courses that add no value to their professional preparation. So for example, an early childhood education student preparing to work in a daycare is required to complete a course such as Western Civilization. So that class has no connection to child development, early literacy, or classroom practices. So this student probably would be better served with taking a course related to teaching or how to teach social studies concepts in early childhood. So in this example, that course increased both the time and the cost that's required to earn a degree. If the goal of higher ed is to prepare a student for a productive career and informed participation, I think the degree program should focus solely on the knowledge and skills relevant to the field of study. Although I do know that people will say that, in summary, that some people say credit requirements will weaken the value of a college degree, although the value of a college degree, unfortunately, has already been weakened. I mean, there's people that are graduating with 120 credits and they can't even find a job. So I think this offers a great, opportunity to expand that. So I'm supporting these two bills and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I see no questions. Thank you very much for your testimony. Next up is Kimberly Beardsley Carr, followed by Nathan Alder, who is right. Kimberly's remote.
I am. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, honorable co-chairs, ranking members, and members of the Higher Education and Employment Advancement Committee. My name is Kim Beardsley Carr, and I'm the Director of Community Standards at the University of Connecticut. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of the House Bill 5426, an act requiring the availability of advocates during disciplinary proceedings. Our current policies align closely with this bill as written. Under UConn Student Code of Conduct, in general, student conduct matters. Any student is entitled to be accompanied by a support person of their choice to any meeting or hearing related to a disciplinary proceeding. Eligible support persons can include an attorney at the student's own expense, a parent, a guardian, family member, faculty, or staff member, a peer, or an individual selected by the student. The support person's role is strictly limited to providing support and guidance. They may not directly address the hearing body or the student conduct officers, question witnesses, or otherwise actively participate in the process, including during hearings. Students are advised to select a support person whose schedule aligns with the proceeding, as delays will not be granted due to scheduling conflicts. For matters involving sexual assault, stalking, and intimate partner violence under Title IX, UConn exceeds these baseline protections by providing trained advisors consistent with the federal requirements. If a student lacks an advisor for a live hearing, the university assigns one at no cost, and the advisor may take more of an active role, such as cross-examination, as permitted by federal law. Because the bill requires only that students be entitled to bring an advisor or support person of their choice without causing postponement or delay, and explicitly defers to existing policies under Connecticut General Statutes, Section 10A55M for sexual misconduct cases, UConn's practices fully satisfy that legislation. However, should the bill or its implementation be interpreted more expansively, for example, by requiring the university to provide and formally train advisors or support people for all conduct cases, or by expanding the advisor's role to allow active participation, it would create meaningful fiscal and administrative burdens. These would include additional staffing, development of training curriculum, and scheduling complexities across stores and all of our regional campuses, given our annual case volume. We ask that you consider the following clarifying amendment, which would ensure full alignment and avoid any unintended burdens. So I'm going to go ahead and read through the bill, and I will highlight the areas. Not later than August 1st, 2026, each institution of higher education in the state shall adopt a policy that any student shall be entitled to be accompanied to any meeting relating to a disciplinary proceeding concerning such student by an advisor or support person of the student's choice in a non-participatory capacity, provided that one, the involvement of such advisor or support person does not create a conflict or result in the postponement or delay of such a meeting scheduled. 2, for disciplinary proceedings concerning sexual assault, stalking, and intimate partner violence, the policies adopted pursuant to the provisions of Section 10A55M of the General Statutes concerning a student's entitlement to be accompanied by an advisor or support person shall take precedence over the implementation of the policy adopted under this section to the extent such policies differ. Nothing in this section shall be construed to require an institution to provide an advisor or support person. UConn remains committed to supporting students through the disciplinary process and stands ready to work with the committee. Thank you for your opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And so I just wanted to clarify. So you feel like UConn's current policies are fully compliant with the draft?
I do.
I know you have a couple of small amendments that you want to make or suggest. Can you do advisors who accompany students in disciplinary actions, are they currently prohibited from being actively engaged in the proceedings?
Yeah, so currently, let's say, like last week, we had a student come in and they brought their parent along with them for their meeting. So what we ask is that in the beginning, we obviously check with the student to make sure they're comfortable with their parent being present and get the student's approval. If we get the student's approval, then we'll invite that parent in to our meeting. We let them know that all of our questioning and everything related to the case is going to be directly, all the question is going to be directed at the student and not at their parent. I always say that I hope that we could get through that line of questioning. And if there's any questions that the parent or guardian has after the meeting, I'm happy to answer those questions.
Okay, I get that's your practice. Does that,
yes.
So are they currently prohibited from participating in the disciplinary hearing?
So I would say not fully. So let's say if they are, begin to get like aggressive or argue with us in any way, we would have the right to ask them to leave said meeting. But if they're asking general questions about our process or asking about resources or ways to support their student through that, they can absolutely ask us those questions during the meeting. We have that included just in case if there is any disruption regarding the meeting, and then we will reschedule if needed. I hope that answers your question. So they can participate, they can ask us some of those questions, but we ask that they don't interrupt our investigation process.
Understood. Okay, I understand. I mean, I think that, the point of the legislation, I think, is that these kinds of disciplinary hearings can be very stressful.
They can.
For the student. I imagine they're stressful. Other actors, a complainant might be pretty sort of stressed out, for example, as well. But what would the university do in the circumstance that you identified a high degree of anxiety with a student who had not taken advantage of their ability to have an advisor at that point?
Yeah, I can talk about what I would do as the director of my unit. I do want to make sure that I make it clear that we do put the support person information throughout our letters to a student. We also cover all of that in our first meeting. And if the student doesn't want to proceed without that person, then we'll reschedule. So if a student shows up and has that anxiety, our first goal is to get them the support that they need and get them connected to resources. I probably at that point would pause that meeting and reschedule it to a time that works for them and where they could have that support person present.
And is that sort of practice embedded in your training manuals or
yes.
policies for other hearing officers who might have a role in this?
Yes, it is.
Great, thank you. Are there other questions by members of the committee? I don't see any. So I think we understand UConn's position and policy on this, and we appreciate you taking your time out of your day to share your perspective with us.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you all.
Thank you. Nathan Alder, followed by Christopher Todd.
Representative Haddad, Senator Slapp, honorable members of the committee. Good afternoon. My name is Nathan Alder, and I'm a professor in the Department of Molecular and Cell Biology at the University of Connecticut Storrs campus, where I also direct a laboratory that's focused on understanding the molecular basis of disease, chronic disease, and developing cures for them. I'm here to urge support for Senate Bill 428 that would provide much needed safety nets for our research enterprises at our public institutions in Connecticut. You know, when my colleagues and I embarked on a lifetime of research in academics, we did so with a tacit understanding that the government would be supporting our research. That has been a paradigm for research in American universities for the better part of a century now, so that there would be federal funding for research. Of course, federal funding levels have waxed and waned over the years. Federal funding has always been very competitive, but we've always had this knowledge that the government had our back, that federal funding bodies like the NSF and the NIH would judge our research based solely on its merits and not on some other kind of bias, or not subject to cancellation due to governmental ideology. I don't need to tell you that what's going on in DC right now is absolutely antithetical to that kind of decades-long understanding between the federal government and academic research. What we're seeing now is a very targeted kind of attack on many different kinds of research programs, some of which are very core to UConn's research mission that include things like climate change, climate justice, reproductive and mental health, DEI, so many things that have been targeted for cancellation that have absolutely devastated the research programs of so many of my fellow colleagues there, researchers at UConn, and their research programs that are scrambling to keep the lights on in their labs with this very little time to adjust. But I would offer that as grievous as those targeted cancellations are, they don't tell the entire story. The problem is systemic. We are seeing an attack on federal funding across the board. So there are draconian cuts to the budget. There are nefarious policies put into place that intentionally reduce the number of new awards being given out. So for example, if we take the NIH, which is the agency that I'm most aligned with, you look at what the White House and the OMB right now currently have a stranglehold on congressionally approved budgets that are directed toward biomedical research, so that the number of approved investigator-initiated awards being awarded right now is just a fraction of what we saw a year ago. Carried to its conclusion, this is going to be impossible to sustain the research program for any public R1 university. And if we talk about the resilience and strength of my colleagues, they are pivoting as fast as they can to find other ways to diversify revenue streams in their lab, including going to industry partnerships, philanthropy, smaller agencies, for example. But it's become a full-time job, essentially, just trying to find funding for many of them. And I will say that for an established investigator like me and my cohorts, I'm not as worried about us. But I look at people like my junior faculty colleagues and our graduate student and our postdoctoral trainees, the people whose stars are just now rising and who are working diligently on the research they're passionate about. They deserve the same kind of government support that I had when I was entering this profession. And if we were to ever lose that kind of talent pool in Connecticut, getting it back would be measured in generations. So I will say that Senate Bill 428 addresses that issue. For all of the many reasons that Dr. DeStefano laid out, the $50 million would do an incredible amount to sustain the research infrastructure that is under threat right now. But I would say that it does more than that. It reaffirms the state of Connecticut's belief in our ability to train the next generation of UConn researchers, of Connecticut researchers, puts faith in us as curators of research innovation that keeps Connecticut at the forefront in this nation. And it also shows that you have support for the integrity of our research mission. So I thank you very much for proposing this bill. And this is honestly some of the best news that my colleagues and I have gotten from our government in a very long time. Thank you for that. And I urge you to support it.
Thank you. Just two sort of follow-up questions to your testimony, and they're both related to capacity and what might be lost if bridge funding. I'm going to be really optimistic and say, you know, we're looking at a 3-year period of time when these kinds of policies will continue to be in place, and after that, I hope that research funding will return to to what we're more accustomed to. But I don't know that will happen. But let's assume in a best case scenario, we're just trying to get through the next 3 years. Without additional funding, what happens to the infrastructure and the university's capacity to continue to do research if we don't bridge fund over the next 3 years?
What happens in any research program when you lose that expertise? If a lab is to lose its technicians, its graduate students, its postdoctoral workforce, it doesn't get established overnight. So when it's lost, it's in many cases going to be gone forever. That kind of institutional knowledge that goes on in every lab, that kind of expertise, once you've lost it, it is next to impossible to get it back. That's why this bridge funding is so absolutely essential to keep labs going, to provide summer funding or a semester or so for the existing people in the lab to keep that institutional knowledge going until hopefully times do get better.
Yeah, and you mentioned postdocs and graduate students, and I know, unfortunately, that they're often at the leading edge of what's lost or cut from a research grant if, when times get tough. And so do you have any information about the number of graduate students? I've heard anecdotally, well, it might be in some written testimony too, that the number of paid graduates is declining rapidly. And I worry about whether or not that is sort of interrupting the flow of potential new PhD sort of candidates who are capable of continuing research after current generations decide that they're going to retire or stop doing their research.
That's exactly the case, yes. So in my own department, we've had to roll back the number of PhD students we could admit just for our funding capacity. But it absolutely is true that it does place constraints. Now, if you look at the graduate assistantships that are paid out, they really come in two different types. Some are from federally funded grants. Others are from TA-ships. Now, in my particular department, there are a lot of available slots for teaching assistantships, which will allow a graduate student to stay on in a lab doing work research part-time, but they're getting paid from a TA-ship. That's not true of all departments. So the amount of TA-ships that are given out that would be given support from their school or college is in some cases very limited. And so that means when a laboratory loses its federal funding capacity, it loses the ability to pay its staff, its graduate students.
Thank you for those responses. I see Representative Franz has a question.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony today. Through you, Mr. Chairman, can you just talk a little bit about how the research requests are being affected by the funding coming out of Washington or the lack of funding coming out of Washington? Are researchers not submitting the types of requests that they have in the past, or how are those funding requests being affected by?
You mean research proposals?
Proposals, yeah.
Quite the opposite. All of my colleagues were doubling down on the number of proposals that get turned into institutions like the NIH, like the NSF and others. Part of the problem, though, is that so few new applications are being awarded that applications that would go through the peer review process at a federal funding institution that sometimes score in the third, second, even first percentiles, I mean, the best of the best, are being deemed outstanding but unfundable. And so they have to go right back to the professor and they resubmit. So now I'm actually serving on a study section for the NIH later this month. And I know that a portion of the grants that we are evaluating represent this kind of backlog. So it's a disaster. I mean, people are just writing grants as fast as they can. So they're not slowing down on the applications. They're in fact enhancing them. But as I mentioned, a lot of my colleagues are looking toward other revenue streams, so private industry, partnerships, philanthropy, et cetera, doing whatever we can to keep the lights on in the lab.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, of course.
Thank you very much. Are there any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up is Christopher Todd, who is joining us remotely. We'll be followed by Mike Craer from Yale University.
Good afternoon, honorable co-chairs, ranking members, and members of the Higher Education and Employment Advancement Committee. My name is Christopher Todd, and I am the Executive Director of the Office of Early College Programs at the University of Connecticut. Thank you for this opportunity to provide testimony on behalf of the university on Senate Bill 427, an act concerning dual enrollment programs. I'm pleased to speak with you again. Ongoing legislative efforts demonstrate that the commitment to supporting dual credit opportunities for Connecticut high school students remains robust and in the minds of stakeholders and legislatures statewide. The University of Connecticut and our partner high schools applaud the work of this committee and others on the passage of House Bill 6445 and PA 2599 last session, which codified and articulated alignment across all dual credit program providers in the state of Connecticut. Last year's achievements define dual credit, specifically concurrent enrollment and dual enrollment programming modalities, and established NACEP accreditation standards as the benchmark by which all Connecticut dual and concurrent enrollment program providers would be held to ensure the best possible outcomes for Connecticut students and families. As we've talked before, the University of Connecticut is proud to be the state and nationally recognized leader in dual credit programming. As the nation's oldest concurrent enrollment program since 1955, UConn has provided meaningful access to rigorous college coursework for high school students across the state. As the state's largest provider of dual credit opportunities and currently the only NACEP accredited program, UConn's Early College Experience, or ECE program, is currently serving 20,855 students who are enrolled in over 36,813 courses across nearly 197 high schools statewide. During the past 24-25 academic year, 44% of all students enrolled in UConn coursework through ECE were identified as first-generation students, and 41% of our students were fully waived, accounting for approximately $2.2 million in fee waivers. As the state's largest land grant institution, access and opportunity is paramount to all that we do in the Office of Early College Programs. While we support the intent of the proposed language in Senate Bill 427, we are concerned that the existing bill language will cause unintentional barriers to access to meaningful dual credit opportunities for Connecticut students. As currently written, the bill language is exclusive to dual enrollment, failing to include both dual enrollment and concurrent enrollment modalities. Both dual and concurrent enrollment modalities were codified last year in House Bill 6445 and Public Act 2599 as part of the statewide effort to expand access to dual credit opportunities. Neglecting to account for concurrent enrollment modalities in the language of the law will unintentionally exclude the state's largest providers of dual credit opportunities. Legislation that seeks to expand meaningful access to dual credit opportunities should be inclusive of all modalities. This is critical to ensure that high schools and students continue to benefit from all dual credit pathways and that stakeholders are accurately accounted for within the Connecticut State Department of Education's annual Next Gen Accountability Index reporting requirements. They currently report on dual credit course completion, which is publicly available in EdSite. For your consideration, we would recommend amending Section 1D2 as follows: that not later than January 1st, 2027, the Commissioner of Education shall appoint a dual and concurrent enrollment program coordinator to track the establishment of such programs throughout the state and student outcomes from such programs, including but not limited to completion rates and average grades by school district. Additionally, while the University of Connecticut commends the committee's efforts to include reimbursement for course fee waivers for dual credit opportunities, as written, Section 1G creates unintended barriers of access for students and families. By linking the funding mechanism to a reimbursement program, it places the burden of cost on students and families up front, assuming they have the financial means to pay for a course prior to seeking reimbursement. Instead, we encourage adding language to the existing Section 1E that makes dual and concurrent enrollment inclusive with advanced coursework and expands access to fee waiver grants to institutions of higher education that provide dual and concurrent enrollment programming. This would address the access to the coursework concerns while ensuring that qualifying students and families never see a bill or incur any financial obligation for enrollment in dual credit coursework. Please consider amending Section 1E as follows: for the fiscal year ending in June 30, 2027, and each fiscal year thereafter, the Commissioner of Education shall, within allowable appropriations, establish a fee waiver grant program to expand opportunities for high-need high school students to access advanced courses or programs inclusive of dual and concurrent enrollment coursework. A local or regional board of education or Connecticut institution of higher education may apply in the form and manner prescribed by the Commissioner of Education for reimbursement for any fees charged to such board or incurred by the institution of higher ed for any high-need student who is enrolled in advanced coursework for the program, inclusive of dual and concurrent enrollment. The language within this bill should be reflective of all dual credit modalities to ensure that all partner schools, students, and families are able to leverage the pathways and opportunities that are available to them. If implemented with the proposed language changes, this legislation will build off previous efforts of the Connecticut State Department of Education to advance and align dual credit programming. As shared previously, there's no one dual credit program or modality that is going to meet all the needs of schools, students, and families statewide. It is the collective power of dual credit programming, both dual and concurrent enrollment in Connecticut, that will create meaningful outcomes for students. The University of Connecticut looks forward to continuing to be a state leader in providing meaningful access to college coursework and credit for Connecticut high school students across the state. Thank you for the opportunity to offer feedback on this important legislation and for your consideration of our proposed language. Please let me know if you have any questions or require additional information.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I don't see that we have written testimony yet here. That doesn't say that you haven't sent it, but if you haven't sent it, send it immediately after you finish the conclusion of your testimony. We're working really quickly right now, and some of your suggestions were right on the mark. So I appreciate you sharing them with.
I'll work with the university team to make sure you have that language.
The only I just wanted to, I was trying to pay attention. The percentage of students who currently account for free waivers in your program is what percentage?
So last academic year is 41%. We just finished our spring enrollment period and we're finalizing our numbers for this current year. So we should have those in the next 2 weeks.
So essentially you guarantee in your program that if you waive fees for students that can't afford.
Correct. So if you are a student or a family that qualifies for any federal subsidy or free and reduced lunch, you are waived of all fees for the program. Of our 197 partner high schools, I believe 67 of them are fully waived this academic year, where that means any student in those high schools don't pay any fees to take UConn coursework through our program.
Last year, in the budget, we set aside $6 million. It's in the Department of Education's budget. It's listed for dual and enrollment programming. Do you know what the Department of Education is planning to do with that $6 million at this point?
We do not. So my colleagues and I in various programs across the state have not received any updates from the Connecticut State Department of Education regarding what the plan is for those funds.
But the uses that are outlined in current statute around fee waivers, do you know if, I guess I'm trying to figure out if, I've grown increasingly concerned about our over-reliance on fee waivers as a way of paying for services that we require or encouraging, but don't fund. And I'm just curious to know whether or not you think that it is a possibility that the Department of Education might use that $6 million to reimburse institutions for the fee waivers that they've already embedded in their programs.
I believe that it has been on the table as part of the discussion. Again, I haven't been intimately involved with any of those conversations with anybody from the State Department of Education, but I believe that has been part of the conversation. I also believe that direct reimbursement to partner school districts to cover the costs and access of course opportunities. So our program, which I know some of the programs in the state do, we have a third-party payee option. So we have some partner districts that any student that isn't waived, the school district pays the fees for those students. So essentially the district incurs the cost of partnering with the program. So I believe that that's been on the table as well, but no, we have not had any updates regarding that funding.
Thank you very much. And again, look forward to receiving those suggestions for amendments as soon as you can send them along. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
More questions from members of the committee? I don't see any. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Mike Craer, right? Great. Followed by James, I'm not, Cuzzo, I guess. I'm gonna hack that one, but for the time being, you have the floor. Thanks for
Thank you.
being here.
Thank you, Representative Haddad, Senator Slapp, and honorable members of the Higher Education and Employment Advancement Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in strong support of Senate Bill 428. My name is Mike Crair. I'm a professor and serve as Vice Provost for Research at Yale University. Yale strongly supports the goal of this legislation and appreciates the committee's recognition that research is a critical driver of economic growth, innovation, and public benefit in Connecticut. Research universities play an essential role in advancing scientific discovery, improving health outcomes, training future talent, and helping states remain competitive in rapidly evolving fields of technology and medicine. This bill comes at an important time. The prospects for research funding from the federal government are increasingly unstable, which along with increased federal regulations and oversight makes for a challenging environment for our research community. In that context, state support is especially important, and Connecticut has an opportunity to join other states such as California, Massachusetts, and Texas, which recognize that investment in research is not simply support for higher education. It is an investment in the state's long-term economic strength, health innovation, and workforce. The outcomes of these investments are significant. Yale discoveries have contributed to major medical advances, including chemotherapy, early insulin pump development, the discovery of esketamine as a treatment for depression, and recently the first FDA-approved therapy that delays the onset of juvenile diabetes. The Yale research community works closely with entrepreneurs to bring new therapies to patients and expand economic activity, with 14 new companies launched just in 2024 alone and over 2,200 active patents worldwide. Connecticut is particularly well positioned to build on this momentum because of the strong partnerships already developing across the state's research institutions. Yale values ongoing collaboration with the University of Connecticut and other higher education partners in the state through initiatives such as Quantum CT, which demonstrate how coordinated investment in advanced research can strengthen Connecticut's leadership in emerging technologies and secure long-term economic benefits. Research investments also support talent development. Much of the work conducted in university research settings directly trains students, postdoctoral scholars, and early career investigators who will become the next generation of scientists, clinicians, and innovators that drive economic development for partner industries and academic institutions. For example, universities in the state work with partners in aerospace on material science applications to advance their commercial technologies, and with partners in the bioscience and pharmaceutical industries on new therapeutics in immunology and oncology. For these reasons, Yale strongly supports SB 428 and appreciates the Higher Education Committee's commitment to advancing policies that strengthen research and innovation across the state's higher education institution. This legislation sends an important signal that Connecticut recognizes the long-term value of academic partnerships, discovery, and innovation for the greater good of society. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Do you have an estimate for how, we heard earlier from UConn, for just how much of an impact recent federal changes have had on your research portfolio?
So I think the dominant impact is one of instability and insecurity. So our young investigators are unclear or unsure whether they have any significant future prospects to continue their research careers. That's the dominant challenge. Federal funding for research at Yale has remained flat this year relative to last fiscal year. We were on a 7 to 8% compound annual growth rate over the last 10 years, but this past fiscal year it's flat. So that's a significant disruption of the growth that we've experienced over the last 10 years. But I would say the dominant interruption is on the ability of young investigators to obtain new awards and to sustain their momentum in developing a research career. I will note, I think it's relevant, that a number of new federal awards in research, especially at the NIH, is down almost 70% this year relative to last year. So there's a massive delay in issuing new awards from the National Institutes of Health, despite the fact that the appropriations were flat.
Do you anticipate a future impact as a result of that 70%?
It's very
decline?
difficult to anticipate with any confidence what's going to happen because of the significant uncertainties and chaos. Last year, there was a huge delay in issuing of awards in the last fiscal year. And towards the end of the last fiscal year, at the end of FY25 federal fiscal year, there was a rapid catch up. They didn't quite reach the level that they did in FY24, but they have a much bigger gap to fill this year because they're so much further behind this year than they were last year. So it's possible they will issue many new awards in the coming months before the end of the fiscal year, but it's difficult to anticipate with certainty.
Thank you for those responses. One last question. What is the current status of the federal government's plans for indirect costs?
Yep. So the appropriations committees across all the major federal agencies, including those that impact the NIH, the NSF, the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, put in blocking language that prevented the agencies, those federal agencies, from changing the indirect model. It's a temporary measure. So they are considering new models for facilities and administration indirect costs called the FAIR model, which you might have read a little bit about. So the idea would be to implement a new transparent and fair model for reimbursements of university expenses. So we expect for the FY27 fiscal year, federal fiscal year, that a fair model will be built into the legislation. But right now, the administration is prevented from changing the indirect reimbursement policies.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions from members of the committee? Representative Branco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. I see that you're listed as remote, but you're here, so it's nice to see you in person. Appreciate that. When it comes to this research and funding, we're talking about basically establishing a state organization for handing out research. I don't think you're going to find anyone here that doesn't believe in the value of research. You don't have to sell us on the benefit. But at the same time, we're talking about using taxpayer money here for research. And so can you walk me through what the process is like applying for federal grants and research versus what you envision for this new funding commission for the state?
So just to note, the federal government is by far the big dog in funding research, right? It funds on average. So the University of Connecticut and Yale each receive less than 3% of our research funding from the state and more than 50% of our research funding from the federal government. So I don't expect that to change based upon what we're talking about here. This is working in the margins. And I would urge you to consider an approach where you work in the margins where the federal government has decided that's not a priority for funding, but the state of Connecticut believes it is a priority for funding. And so in the past, that would be, for instance, stem cell research, which was the federal government declined to fund, but the state of Connecticut decided was a priority for a variety of reasons. So because it's relatively small dollars in comparison to the federal government, my suggestion would be to identify priority areas that the state views as important for its economic and academic development that the federal government has declined or is deprioritizing. And then have a merit review process, just like we would do for federal funding, where academics apply for the funding, and there's a committee of peers which review for the strength of the awards relative to other awards that they have been applied for.
Do you see this academic research funding commission being the ones that determine what areas they'll invest in, or do you see that more as a legislative decision?
So that's often a collaboration. I think having a merit review process is essential. So you don't fund awards that lack scientific rigor. And then if, for instance, if there are awards or in areas that the federal government has declined to pursue because of cancellations, then those would be areas that would be ripe or prime for funding through a commission like this, where the federal government has decided that's not a priority, but the state deems it a priority. And I think that would be a dialogue. That's already the case for federal funding, is a dialogue where the Congress makes priorities, for instance, on cancer research or on brain research, and then the funding tends to go to those areas relative to other areas.
And then would you see the State Funding Commission as the body that views, vets, and awards the research grants?
I think that's the idea. Yep.
Okay. And then you mentioned this FAIR model for
Yes.
funding.
Yeah.
That would be established in federal guidelines. Would you see the state, do you like the FAIR model? Is that something you would see the state following or totally separate guidelines?
So that's a great question, and I haven't considered it deeply. As it is right now, funding that the Yale University receives from the state does not include reimbursements for facilities and administration costs. There's no reimbursement. So those are costs that the university has to bear. And so the federal government reimburses for facilities and administration costs, which is this FAIR model that we're talking about, a new sort of way to calculate what those reimbursements are. I don't anticipate the state will begin to reimburse for those facilities and administration costs, but very willing to have that conversation.
Okay. I appreciate the information. It's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions? I don't see any. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Number 17, James Cuzzo is next. I don't see him online. And so we will move, I don't see him in the room. So we'll move to Stephen Meyer, who is online and joining us remotely. He'll be followed by Tracy McAvoy. Thank you for joining us remotely, and we look forward to your testimony.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yes?
Yes.
Great. Well, I'm literally all the way across the other side of the country. And I would like to thank you at the Higher Education Committee from hearing from us today. And by us, I mean myself and my wife, but she would be here if she could, but she's inside the house right now with our 2 young grandsons as we babysit every day. Gina and I are the parents of Katie Meyer, who was a student at Stanford University. And I am here testifying in support of 5426. This is an incredibly important bill that will help save the lives of your college students in Connecticut. Our daughter, Katie, was an incredible all-in human being, and she loved Stanford University. She was an RA, a Mayfield Fellow, a Defense Innovative Scholar. She was going to be teaching a design class on campus. She was awaiting acceptance to Stanford Law. She was a captain and goalkeeper on the women's soccer team, and she helped them win an NCAA championship in 2019 in penalty kicks. Katie was incredibly excited about her future. I tell you all of this not to put her on a pedestal, but rather for us to understand that suicide can occur with anyone, including and sometimes especially high achievers. Katie died by suicide in her dorm room just over 4 years ago to the day. Unbeknownst to us, Katie got caught up in a disciplinary action for spilling coffee on a football player who had allegedly sexually assaulted one of Katie's teammates in a stairwell on campus. The teammate technically was a minor at the time, and as far as we understand it, the football player received no consequences from the school for his actions, whereas Katie was pulled into a 6-month-long disciplinary process investigation. And on the night of her death, Katie received a 5-page, single-spaced charge letter with severe language that not only threatened to withhold her degree, but outright removal from the university. Everything she had worked for in her life could be taken away, just 3 months shy of graduation. This email came after nearly 4 months of no contact from that office. We have learned after her death that Katie thought the whole thing was over, and why wouldn't she? After all, nothing apparently happened with the football player for a sexual assault on a minor, so why would anything happen to her for spilling coffee? The email further came at night at the last possible moment of a 6-month statute of limitations. Katie suffered what experts called an acute crisis stress reaction, which yes, has been covered today a little bit. And that's when an otherwise flourishing member of our society has something go unexpectedly sideways in their life and they can't see their way out of it, feeling hopeless and scared and trapped with no way out. Now, I will say we know as a society, this can happen because if someone's pulled over or otherwise has to spend a night in jail, any of you in that room tonight, we as a society make sure you have nothing on you that you could possibly harm yourself or someone else with. For we don't want to lose a good member of our society over one bad moment. We knew nothing about what she was going through until after her death. And to this day, 4 years later, as her parents, we were just shattered to the core. But we were trying to turn that pain into purpose and possibly save the life of another college student and spare their family, their campus community, the pain of a loss of this magnitude. And as yes was also covered briefly before, college students are part of an 18 to 25-year-old population with very little real life experience, whose brain, specifically the prefrontal cortex, is not fully developed yet. So no matter how smart and independent they are, in challenging and stressful situations, they tend to think more with the middle brain, which can lead to more emotional, irrational, and impulsive actions. This is why the option of an outside the university advisor, who the student trusts and is informed on the situation, and I will say, and gets regular updates. Out here in California, we have bi-weekly updates of the case. This advisor will offer the support and guidance the student needs to get through this type of situation with an appropriate resolution, instead of feeling all alone, and avoid weeks of potential rumination and spiraling. We have learned of many stories where there's an inside the university advisor that the student believes they can trust that does not have their best interest at heart. And another way to look at this is through the lens of due process. You could have a 21-year-old who might be in college, but let's say this person's not, they're 21. They're not in college and they have a multi-year criminal record of really hurting people, commit another crime fully captured on camera. They're going to have the presumption of innocence and an attorney if they cannot afford one. And we have heard far too many stories around the nation where students are presumed guilty and they are allowed no representation or advisor. And if they do get representation or an advisor, that person is not allowed to talk. I'm not sure I agree with that. Might as well bring in a houseplant. That has to change. We believe had this law been in place at the university where our daughter attended, she would still be alive today. And we now have Katie Myers Law in California. The University of Colorado has taken it on. And after the resolution of our case, our lawsuit with Stanford is taking it on. We commend you for your leadership there in Connecticut and looking out for your young people and your well-meaning campus administrators, by the way. And if possible, we would never, ever want to see another family have to go through what we've been through these last 4 years, as we are shattered. And I am fully happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing your story with us. And my condolences to you and to your family.
Thank you.
I mean,
Thank you.
A tragedy. And certainly we'd like to do what we can do here in Connecticut to prevent similar incidences. So,
of course,
thank you for offering your testimony. In your testimony, I'm just trying to figure out the difference between advisors and attorneys. Thing. And in your testimony, you said that you thought it was really critical for the advisor to have the ability to participate, I think, more fully in the disciplinary proceeding than what I think is contemplated in the legislation. Just wanted to give you a chance to expound on that a little bit and figure out where what the important components are. To my mind, an advisor ensures that they have that support system, but does fall short of being somebody who could participate.
Sure.
So I'm just trying to figure out what's truly important here, and what is it that you think we should be doing?
I think you should consider allowing the advisor to participate. That's what we have here in California now. And I think it's okay to test the veracity of the case being brought against the student. And you have a 18 to 22-year-old may not be able to think in the moment of a question they may have for the investigator. Again, out in the outside world, there's plenty of communication that happens between a representative of a client who's under investigation. Obviously, we're thrilled for you guys that you're even have this bill up and that you're considering doing it. It's great. I'm just offering the thought. It always seemed odd to me that you could have an advisor in the room, but they're not allowed to speak. It's just strange to me. Strange. I think that it's important for them to be able to participate in the process. And I think they'd be helpful. And I think that, as was mentioned earlier, if they get too aggressive or out of hand, okay, fine. That they can be asked to leave, or that it can be postponed. I don't understand necessarily why student couldn't have that and have the literally the veracity of the investigation being tested. And then certainly on another point, the bi-weekly update, I think you all should consider very strongly. Katie went through nearly 4 months of not hearing anything from that office. And had she had an advisor, they would have been getting that bi-weekly update, realizing nothing is happening with this case. And they would be it'd be really helpful for them to have been able to check in and go, why is nothing happening? What's going on? But instead, students, sometimes they're allowed just to ruminate and spiral.
Thank you for that perspective and for sharing those ideas with us. So
Of course.
any members have a question? I see Senator Slapp does.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And like my co-chair said, I mean, my deep condolences and sympathies to you and your family. And, you know, for what it's worth, I greatly admire you, you know, channeling your pain into action and helping to save people's lives in California and Colorado, and hopefully when this bill passes in Connecticut as well. You really should be commended for that. I do have a question about that letter that you referred to. Is your thoughts that if this bill was enacted in your state, that this advisor, right, that would have been in place would have been included on that communication? Is that fair to say? And then that could have reached out to Katie, whether it been you or your wife or whoever, but some
Yes.
person. Yeah.
Yep. Conceptually, we had that from the beginning, you know, that sometimes a student, again, sometimes like even with Katie, this is the first time they're ever really in trouble. You know, you get these high achieving students, you guys have Yale, UConn, these magnificent universities over there. It's a student, you know, we use the phrase life's work a lot of times with an elderly person. Her life's work was this, his was that. To become a student or student athlete at Yale or at UConn, that's that young person's life work. And they maybe have never really been in trouble. And now all of a sudden they are. They may not even really, no matter how smart they are, able to handle what's happening right now. And so if their advisor gets keyed in from day one and lets them know, look, something happened here. I'm going to help you. It's all going to be okay. Let's find out what the appropriate process and resolution is going to be, and just let them know, like, mistakes happen. You know, I think also as a society, we kind of accept that our young people are going to go off to universities and make mistakes, and hopefully they'll learn from it in a productive way. And conceptually speaking, this will help that be accomplished. You know, you could be their high school football coach, their debate coach from high school, whatever it is. Just somebody who's got a little more years down the road in their life and is going to be able to offer them some perspective and guidance.
Thank you for that. Your message is received, and we will, I think, work hard to make sure that we do right by Katie, your daughter. So thank you again.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much for today. Any other questions?
Representative Branco has a question.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Stephen, thank you for being here today. And I too would like to echo my sympathies to you. I can't even imagine the pain that must cause. So I'm sorry to hear that, but I do appreciate you sharing your story with us and giving us this law idea to pass in Connecticut. And I think most of my questions have been answered through today, but what I'm wondering is, do you have any success stories to point to in California or wherever else this law wasn't enacted? Any success stories to point to, maybe?
I would like to say I have hard data on it, but this is the first scholastic year with all the UCs, like UC Berkeley, UCLA, all the Cal States and all the community colleges, that they have this in place. So it's a little soon to have the data on it. I guess the only success story I could point to is a broader one where my wife and I do speak at a lot of universities, and there have been a lot of breakthroughs where a student will come up to us afterwards and say, thank you for this. If I ever find myself in trouble, or they're currently in trouble, they're going to let somebody know outside the university. And so conceptually, I do believe it's going to work. I do believe even if it saves one life, it will have been worth it. And then backing off of that a little bit, if it just helps the well-being of a student who's going through this process and doesn't make it so traumatic, makes it a little more educational rather than highly just punitively focused, then I think it's a success right there, right out of the gate.
I would agree. And truthfully speaking, you might not ever actually know the success of this law,
right?
Theoretically, because
right,
we're hopefully preempting any tragedy again. So
yeah,
I thank you for your story and sharing it with us. We have comments and we have some discussions certainly to consider as this bill moves forward and potential changes. But again, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Y'all are amazing. Thank you.
And thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up, Tracy McAvoy. She'll be followed by Kim Swift. Ms. McAvoy, you're welcome to the committee. Ready.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Senator Slapp, Representative Haddad, Representative Bronco, and distinguished members of the Higher Education and Employment Advancement Committee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on behalf of the Wave Strong Foundation regarding raised bill number 5426. On March 31st, 2022, I lost my son, Matthew McAvoy, to suicide. He was 17 years old and a junior at Darien High School. At the time of his death, we began the college search, and he was narrowing down his choices while thinking about a major. It gave him a glimpse of hope at a time in his life when he was trying to look past the darkness that overwhelmed him. In my reflection on the last few months of Matthew's life, I have questioned whether he would have been successful in college. Would he be able to navigate the academic and social stressors of being a first-year student? Would he be able to navigate, and most importantly, if he was struggling or received a disciplinary sanction, would he have told me or his dad? Unfortunately, I will never have the opportunity to face these realistic questions that many families are currently experiencing. I have two children, two living children. I have a daughter, she is a junior in high school, and I have a son, and my eldest son was in college. He was a sophomore at the time when Matthew had passed. When Matthew passed, our son Campbell had to notify his professors. It was right around finals. Finals was starting, and my son Campbell was not able to take his finals. He wanted to postpone them, and all of his professors were extremely difficult on him. And so he ended up contacting a family friend of ours who became his advocate. And so from experience, we know this on the backside as our son, who was a college student at the time. Another story is that I had met a mother who lost her son to suicide. He was a rising sophomore in college, and he had failed out of his classes his freshman year. His parents did not know that. And so he spent his summer hiding this feeling and this fact, and his parents packed up his car the night before, knowing that there was nowhere to go for his parents to drop him off when he went back to college the next day. This son took his life late in the evening after their last family dinner. And when his parents called the school to tell them that his son was not returning because he had passed, they found out he was not enrolled to be a sophomore. The registrar's office told them that he had failed all of his classes the year before. And as his parents reflect with deep sorrow, the mother said that they would have done something had they known their son had failed his first year. She would have given him the option not to go back, and they would have figured something out. But unfortunately, she didn't get a chance to offer that alternative because they didn't know. By approving Raised Bill 5426, this committee will lead the country in reducing the stigma of mental health. By allowing college students an advocate during a disciplinary process, this valiant effort leads with a message that young students do not have to navigate this process alone. This bill encourages students to openly discuss their challenges with a trusted advisor before their concerns completely overwhelm them and they resort to desperate action. You will save lives. With the approval of this bill, I respectfully ask that you consider the following additions that were also mentioned by Mr. Meyer, who previously spoke before me, where the advisor needs to be advised about the disciplinary sanction at the same time as the student, and that the advisor needs to have access to the cases or to case updates. I'm appreciative of the testimony from Mrs. Beardsley Carr at UConn and appreciate the process that she has in place. But with these following additions about the advisor needing access and providing an advisor at the beginning of the sanction, I think it would make great strides within the disciplinary process. Thank you again for your time and consideration to listen to my testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you as well for offering your story to us today, and my sympathies are with you as well on the loss of your son. I don't have a question for you at this point. I thank you very much for your testimony and for the suggestions you've made as we review the legislation. I'll just check to see if I do not see additional questions. And so thank you very much for offering your testimony, though it's very meaningful to us, and we appreciate you taking the time to out of your day to share your story with us.
Thank you.
Next up is Kim Swift. Welcome to the community. You can go ahead.
My name is Kim Swift, and I'm a founder and board member of Wave Strong. I would like to start by thanking State Representative Tracy Marr for bringing Bill 5426 forward, and committee leadership and members for hearing me today and considering this bill. On March 1st, 2022, Katie Myers died by suicide. Just 30 days later, on March 31st, our dear friend Matthew was also lost. I fully support this bill because by approving it, you set an example for the rest of our country. You tell young adults and their families that we will do whatever it takes to combat one of the biggest public health epidemics in our nation. The world has changed. We live in a different world than when most of us grew up. I hear constantly that kids today lack resilience, but the truth is they live in a world where stress consumes them. They're bombarded by a perfect online presence that follows them into their beds at night. They feel an enormous pressure to have perfect grades, perfect clothes, and to be the best athlete at the best school. As Pastor Gary shared in his testimony, our kids feel the weight of the world. Many are simply terrified to raise their hand and say, "I'm not okay." The danger of unraveling. As a mother of 2 college graduates, I've seen how quickly a student can completely unravel when faced with an academic or disciplinary situation. In today's world, social media can ruin a student's reputation in a matter of hours. That constant threat, the whisper in their ear saying, "Don't mess up," is both debilitating and dangerous. We all make mistakes. Consequences are how we learn. But for a stressed student, what might seem like a small matter to us feels like a life-threatening emergency to them. At 18, they are legally adults, but they are not ready to process a crisis alone. They need someone they can trust by their side. We learned this from Katie's story, and she should be here today, spreading her joy and her smile. The ripple effect. We know the statistics. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for 10 to 34-year-olds. And these numbers are people. They're Matthew and Katie, who had plans and dreams. When we lose a life, a wave of grief washes over parents, siblings, coaches, and entire communities in ways that are impossible to measure. After losing 3 students in our community in 2022, many of us transformed from moms into a mom brigade. We worked around the clock for days, weeks, months, and now years to pick up the weight our schools could not manage and immerse ourselves in the mental health world. That movement became Wave Strong. I moved to Connecticut 26 years ago because it offers so many things: safety, beauty, opportunity. Let's add leader in mental health to that list. As my dear friend Janet King once told me when we were working so hard to set up our foundation, if you save one life, all this hard work will mean something immeasurable. So let's save as many lives as possible. Thank you for your time and consideration.
And thank you for being with us today and sharing your testimony and your support for the legislation with us. We appreciate that.
You're very welcome.
Are there any questions by members of the committee? I see no questions, and so thank you very much.
Okay.
Next up is Maggie Domont, supposed to be joining us online. I don't see her. So we'll move on to Laura Gambino, who I think just jumped on in the nick of time.
Hello, yes, thank you. Thank you, committee members. I'm Laura Gambino, Vice President of the New England Commission of Higher Education. And on behalf of the commission, I'm pleased to submit testimony regarding SB 396. The New England Commission of Higher Education, or NECHI, a recognized institutional accreditor by the U.S. Department of Education, has been the primary accreditor for Connecticut institutions of higher education for over a century. The commission has established standards for accreditation to ensure quality, innovation, and student success across the ever-evolving landscape of higher education. The commission's standards for accreditation, including its newly revised standards that go into effect on July 1, 2026, affirm that the norm for a baccalaureate degree remains at 120 credits. The commission, however, recognizing the changing higher education landscape, also has a process and has approved on a limited basis baccalaureate degrees of fewer than 120 credits. Any approval of a baccalaureate degree of fewer than 120 credits is submitted to the commission for review and approval prior to implementation under the commission's policy on innovation. The commission has also developed a set of guidelines that the institution proposing to offer these degrees must abide by. These guidelines include 4 requirements. The first is a naming requirement. The name of the degree must clearly distinguish by means of a prefix to potential students and the public at large that what is proposed is not a traditional baccalaureate degree with that 120 credit requirement. To date, the commission has approved career-focused baccalaureate degrees and applied baccalaureate degrees. The second requirement is a transparency requirement. Institutions need to develop a required language provision that they will prominently include in all marketing material. This will include language that some graduate programs, professional schools, and employers might not accept a baccalaureate degree of fewer than 120 credits. The language will also clearly provide the student with what the pathway is to that traditional 4-year degree. The expectation is that this language provision will be made known to potential students and their families in all marketing and admissions materials, including website descriptions of the program. The third requirement is an assessment requirement. Institutions need to develop an assessment plan that measures student outcomes, including but not limited to retention and persistence, student attainment of general education and subject area learning outcomes, student graduation rates, the ability for graduates to obtain employment in their field, and the ability for graduates to gain admission to graduate programs. Institutions are further required to develop plans for remediation when assessment results reveal that students are not meeting outcomes. And then the final requirement is a curricular requirement. Curriculum must include an appropriate mix of credits in the major, in general education, and electives. So programs can't simply lop off the electives or chop off the general education requirements. There must be that mix. The program of study should have a focused educational orientation, be at least 90 credits, with at least 30 credits in substantial advanced coursework in the major awarded by the institution giving the degree, and it must include a pathway to that traditional four-year degree. The Commission has approved institutions to offer baccalaureate degrees of fewer than 120 credits from Rhode Island, 2 institutions, New Hampshire, 3 institutions, and Maine, 2 institutions. In each case, the Commission has only approved a small number of programs, 5 or fewer. This is not a blanket approval for an institution to move large numbers of programs or all of its programs to baccalaureate degrees of fewer than 120 credits. The Commission is currently in conversation with the Massachusetts Department of Higher Education, which recently passed some regulations around innovation, to develop a collaborative process to review and approve baccalaureate degrees of fewer than 120 credits for institutions that are chartered in the state of Massachusetts. While the details of this collaboration are still to be finalized, the plan is for the Department of Higher Ed to do an initial review and approval of the proposal. That proposal would then be reviewed and acted on by NECHI. Approval from NECHI, if granted, would be contingent on final approval from the Massachusetts Department of Higher Education. For all baccalaureate degrees of fewer than 120 credits approved by the Commission, its focus is always on the quality of the academic programs being offered. In each case, a site visit is conducted to the institution with additional monitoring as warranted to assess the success of the students enrolled in these types of programs. So thank you, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And thank you for being here and offering your testimony. I'm sure NECHI has spent lots of time on this issue, and we can only be advantaged by listening to your expertise on the issue. I do have a couple of questions.
Sure.
So you say that you're currently only approving them on a limited basis. I was trying to find, do you mean a number limit, or do you mean the criteria you were listed?
So a number, what I meant there was the number of programs within an institution, right? So the most, the highest number of programs within any institution is 5 at this point. So the Commission has approved, 1 or 2 from one institution and 1 or 2 from another. The Commission does not, at this point, have a limit on the number of institutions altogether that it would approve.
But you're saying that you have adopted a limit of no more than 5 programs per institution.
It's not a hard limit, but that's where the Commission is currently thinking, somewhere in that 5 or 6 range. I can say there was one institution where 5 degrees of fewer than 5 career-focused baccalaureate degrees were approved, and the institution came back with a few more, and the institution was asked to wait, right? And so what institutions are told is once that initial set of programs are approved, no further programs will be approved until the assessment and the evaluation has taken place. So the Commission wants to ensure that the first set of 1 to 5 programs, 1 to 6 programs are underway and successful before they allow the institution to expand that.
Okay, not a hard limit. I guess
not a hard limit at this point. The Commission is looking at its guidance and is expected to add some additional kind of clarity, particularly around the transparency language and the number of proposals, but that will be considered by the Commission in April.
Yeah. And so the number 1 requirement that you listed is also around the naming requirement.
Yes.
And I'm wondering whether that's adequate. I mean, frankly, you know, I understand, you know, the second requirement on the transparency, you sort of work to make sure that students understand the difference between um, a career-focused baccalaureate degree or an applied baccalaureate degree. What efforts are underway to make sure employers understand the difference?
That's a great question, and the commission has had a lot of conversation around how to name this. Should the commission, they discussed, would they decide on what the name was? Would they let the institutions? And so right now, as this is so emergent, the commission has landed on the institution. Will come up with some recommendations for what that name should be. And then the commission will work with the institution to figure out what the appropriate naming is. But there is going to have to be kind of transparency to employers as well, as you say, particularly as these students are graduating and entering the workforce.
How does that transparency occur? I mean, is that something that NETCHI is going to undertake, or is that something that institutions should need to?
I think there's nothing in our standards that speaks directly to that, but I think that's something the commission and the institutions are going to have to consider as these students approach graduation.
Yeah, I think early in your testimony, you say you've affirmed that the norm for a baccalaureate degree remains at 120 credits. And earlier, somebody said that 120 credits was the cornerstone of baccalaureate degrees. You're anticipating my question. Why aren't these enhanced associate's degrees?
That's an interesting way to look at it. The commission talked about that as well. There was some talk about an associate bachelor's degree, like what the proper nomenclature was. I think because it's gone beyond the associates and is closer to the bachelor's. And ours, I just want to be clear, and we intentionally use the language fewer than 120 credits, whereas you have proposed the language of 90. The commission does not say that it has to be 90. And so we have, between 90 and I think 96 at this point is the highest number of credits. So it is kind of leaning towards a baccalaureate. But that, again, it was a great discussion by the commission in thinking about that.
I would have liked to have been in the room for that discussion. 90 is precisely in the middle between baccalaureate and associate.
It is.
It's not closer to baccalaureate than associate. It's right in the middle. Earlier we heard a question around, increasing trend towards modular credentials. And I'm actually sort of sympathetic to the idea that, because we know that some post-secondary education leads to better long-term outcomes for students than no post-secondary education. I'm a little frustrated that the institution that was making this case doesn't offer associate's degrees, which is the first step that you could say, and then you could grow that into a bachelor's degree. They've chosen not to do that, even though they're making the case for a 90-degree baccalaureate degree. But you also say in number 4 that it's a pathway to a 4-year degree. And so I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. So in your accreditation standards, you would not approve a 90 or somewhere in between degree, a degree of less than 120 credits and over 60 credits, unless all of those credits were applicable to 120 degree credit bachelor's degree?
That's absolutely correct. So in the proposal that institutions submit, they must include and clearly show what the additional coursework is that would be needed should a student decide they want to complete that traditional baccalaureate degree. And I should also add that students should also be able to make that switch at any point during their time as a student. So if they're in the 90, 96, whatever credit degree program, they should be able to switch, but they should even be able to finish that, applied baccalaureate degree and then return and know clearly what the coursework is to get that traditional baccalaureate degree. The commission was concerned that a student might enroll for many reasons in that fewer than 120 credit degree, graduate, and then not be able to get into a graduate school of choice or whatever the case may be, have limitations. And so that there would be a pathway for that student. So that is required in every proposal to the commission.
Right. Do you think almost baccalaureate degree would be?
It probably was up for consideration in one of the many conversations the commission had.
We'll see. Last question. So in Massachusetts, it looks like they're headed down actually a different path. Do they currently have program approval required in Massachusetts for 120 credit baccalaureate degrees?
I actually am not sure, but they will have program approval required for the fewer than 120 credit. I think it depends on the charter of the institution, actually.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Are there additional questions? I see Senator Slapp has questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for your time today. How familiar are you with the legislation? It sounds like you are somewhat familiar with legislation in other states, right, around this?
A little bit. We've worked most closely with Massachusetts on it. There was really no interaction with us with Maine and Rhode Island and New Hampshire. All were kind of okay with this. We've seen, confirmation from New Hampshire that these degrees have been approved, but that's been it. But primarily Massachusetts at this point.
Okay, so do they bake the states? Do they bake these restrictions in, or in terms of that has to be stackable? You have to be, as my co-chair just asked, if you decide. Like that every credit has to count towards ultimately if you wanted to get a bachelor's degree, 120 credit hour. Are those things in the legislation in other states, or do they kind of just defer to your standards?
I think, and I'm not an expert in the legislation and all these, but I think in this case, many cases they're deferring to us. And there's language, I believe, in the regulation in Massachusetts, but that's where we're kind of working on a letter of agreement because there are times where we'll actually do the kind of review and evaluation for the department. But again, that's a work in progress.
And your commission, the decision makers in your commission are who? Who decides, what kind of degrees, what the criteria is going to be, what the rigor is going to be for each of these degrees? Who decide? These are people who are representing universities and colleges in the area. Is that right?
Yes. So commissioners, the commission is made up of a body of about 29 or 30 at this point. Most of them are members of higher ed institutions or have some affiliation with higher ed institutions, presidents, provosts, chief financial officers. One in every 7 members per federal regulation of the commission is a public member. So someone who is not currently affiliated with a higher ed institution, but typically has some experience either in education or, legal circles or things like that. So they're a very experienced body of educators, and they are the ones doing the review of these proposals.
And who decides the name of this degree? Is that you all decide, okay, here's what's appropriate, or the options, or each school would decide what the name of this degree is?
At this moment, each school is making that decision, but the commission has to approve what it is. So if, there's been kind of back and forth with some schools, and when the first proposal came through a few years ago, first 2 proposals, there was a lot of back and forth with the schools because the commission, quite frankly, struggled with what the appropriate nomenclature was. And I think still struggles with what the appropriate nomenclature is. They want to have some way to distinguish it by name from that bachelor's degree that we all know that has been in place, for over a century, but there's no clear kind of title or name that's rising to the top. So there's some flexibility right now with it.
Yeah, and that's part of what concerns me with the name. I don't think I understand that maybe there's other parts of the process that are transparent for the students, but the name, the ones that you mentioned, sound the opposite of transparent. It sounds like marketing terms to me. Like, who wouldn't want an applied bachelor's degree? Who wouldn't want a professional bachelor's? That sounds fantastic. That sounds like it's a bachelor's plus, when in actuality it's the opposite. So anyway, that's something that I'm intrigued about, kind of because I think, to your point, transparency is really important, especially when we're talking about people who may be first generation college students, or not even just a 17, 18-year-old, right, who's trying to make a big decision. They could, I think, easily be manipulated by a applied bachelor's degree, whatever that means. So, okay, I appreciate your time and answering all our questions. Thank you. I'll hand it back over to my co-chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Representative Branco has some questions for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe the good senator would like a minor's bachelor's. Um, do you have offhand knowledge of what programs have been approved? What less than
Less than 120? Yes. So I don't have the exhaustive list, but there are programs in computer science, including artificial intelligence, criminal justice, graphic design, hospitality management, business management, police studies, public administration, and psychology,
Okay,
all
so
with either career focused or applied in front of them.
all right, so a pretty wide variety of
Mhm.
scope there.
Mhm.
Do you know what they're doing around the country? I mean, is New England the only ones talking about this, or is this conversation being had across the U.S.?
No, I think this conversation is being had across the US. I think it was Idaho has done some other accreditors. So in NACHE standards for accreditation, we actually specify that a baccalaureate degree is 120 credits. Some of the other institutional accreditors do not have that language, and they have not put in place the guardrails that NACHE has around these types of degrees. So other institutions may be doing this. They just necessarily don't have to go through kind of the requirements that NETCHE has. And because for us, because that 120 is baked into our standards, this does fall under our policy on innovation. So it has to come through as a proposal to the commission.
So theoretically, we're all caught up on what we call this minor bachelor's degree when, because we have that 120 degree credit standard, but someone else in the country under a different accreditation body might be telling me they have a bachelor's, but they only did a 90 credit program.
That is possible.
Okay. And then it seems like most of the outrage or friction, shall we say, is coming from professors. Did you face the same sort of backlash in these other parts of New England that you've already approved these degrees? Or, I mean, was this a fight, or was it people pretty much on board?
So what I would say is the commission has not received any complaints regarding the fewer than 120 degree, 120 credit baccalaureate degrees to this point. So
Okay.
we have not heard directly through our complaint process from faculty.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we could bring you some complaints then, I guess.
Yes, we can never get enough of those.
All right, I appreciate that information. I find it interesting that other bodies, accreditation bodies across the country might have already moved in this direction and not have even changed the name. So, we're concerned about, discrediting a bachelor's degree when we might be hiring kids from other states who have bachelor's degrees, unbeknownst to us, less than 120 credits. So, okay, I think I'd like some more information on what other accreditation bodies have approved and what degrees already exist that might be calling bachelor's degrees still. But otherwise, that's all the questions I have. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Maybe we should all race to the bottom. Are there other accreditors at work in New England?
So at this point, we are all institutional accreditors. Those regional boundaries that we had, for many, many years were broken in 2020. No, none of the NECHE institutions have changed to another accreditor at this point.
They could?
They could. We have had several institutions from other accreditors move into NECHE, but nobody has left our membership.
Yeah, I mean, by and large, I mean, I will say that I think that NECHE is a strong and reputable accreditor. I think that when I think about higher education in New England, I think a lot of that is, I think of us as being real leaders, and that is in no small measure due to the work of our regional accreditor, NECHE. And so thank you for that.
Yeah, well, I would say the commission, those volunteers that do all that work, and it is a lot of work, take their work and their role very seriously. So I will pass that on to them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I certainly believe that. I mean, I do worry that there's a marketplace, and there's been, I mean, we know that there are states and regions that are abandoning the traditional regional accreditor setting up accrediting bodies outside of what is has been the tradition or the convention in those regions. And it's against that backdrop that I'm looking a little at this too. How I am concerned that we may not be able to rely on the good accreditation process that you've established in every instance here in Connecticut, because institutions can choose to change accreditors and go elsewhere if they want to.
That's correct.
Okay. Are there any additional questions? I don't see any. And so thank you very much for appearing
Thank
before our
you.
committee. We hope it was entertaining.
Thank you. Have a
Good.
great day.
We have one more person signed up to testify, and that is Catherine Black. Welcome to our committee. You are the Provost and Vice President from the University of Hartford, and welcome to our committee. We're eager to hear what you have to say.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to address the committee. As our honorable co-chair just said, my name is Catherine Black. I am the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs at the University of Hartford. The University of Hartford supports the approval of SB 396 to allow Connecticut institutions to seek approval for the accreditation of 90 credit degrees. Just like many of our higher education peers in Connecticut and around the country, we are thoughtfully exploring where 90 credit degrees make sense for a select few career-focused academic programs. This discussion will continue to be driven by our academic leadership in partnership with faculty and informed by market demand and data. This specific bill will allow Connecticut to maintain its competitiveness in higher education, given that neighboring states, as you've just heard, have already approved moving forward with 90 credit degrees. We expect these degrees would be particularly appealing to students directly from high school who are confident in their career path, as well as working adults with some college credits who want to complete their degrees for career advancement. This degree offering may also assist in meeting a critical need for students in select disciplines to earn their degree in less time, thereby incurring less out-of-pocket expense and enabling them to enter the workforce earlier. The University of Hartford offers more than 130 academic degrees. This bill would be relevant for a select handful of specialized programs with defined career outcomes. We are looking to the insights of our faculty, our strategic partners, and local employers to identify potential programs. Any new program would follow our standard curriculum approval process with review by departments, colleges, faculty senate, and academic leadership. As you just heard, our regional accreditor, NECHI, has stringent requirements for transparency in naming and marketing of 90 credit degrees, for curricular balance across the major, general education, and electives, as well as for pathways to four-year degrees should a student want to switch to a 120 credit degree. In addition, programs need to demonstrate that students are achieving disciplinary learning outcomes, are persisting through the program and graduating, and are achieving appropriate job placement and graduate school entry outcomes. This bill provides the support necessary for each institution to look to the future, to remain competitive, to meet market and student demands, and to continue to innovate with the input of our faculty and their expertise. If and when we are ready, it will allow us to move toward the accreditation approval process, a strict and appropriate level of program quality oversight, as other states are now approved to do. To echo CCIC's summary, for reasons of competitiveness, affordability, workforce alignment, and student access, the University of Hartford supports the opportunity to pursue accreditation approval for 90 credit degrees as outlined in SB 396. Thank you for your consideration. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony. Are there have any colleges, to the best of your knowledge, started a degree program between 60 and 120 that isn't 90, but it's I think the accreditor just said that that the standard is not pegged to 90 at NETCHI, but it's a variable number of credits that are less than 120. But is 90 sort of the base, is like that, is that the lowest that we're going? They're all between 90 and 120? Is
That's
that
right. That's
where
right.
we're
I
at?
don't know of any that are below 90.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I appreciate, and you know, I think the University of Hartford and many of our other strong institutions here in Connecticut are fine and reputable institutions. I think we've got great world-class institutions here in Connecticut. You know, there are some accredited institutions in Connecticut that are sort of off the beaten path and don't have the sort of names that we all recognize. And sometimes I worry about, you know, opening the door too wide to institutions that may not be as responsible with the new opportunity as every other institution. Do you have any comments about you know, whether or not, you know, every institution can be you can offer assurances for every institution in Connecticut as opposed to just your own?
I think going by NETCHI's guidelines, they have pretty stringent requirements on these baccalaureate programs that are less than 120 credits. So I think if we use NETCHI's guidelines, that all institutions would have to go through those same requirements in order to offer these kinds of degrees. And as my colleague Deborah Leibowitz from Quinnipiac said earlier, perhaps baking into some of your, into the bill's requirements, baking in some of those stringent requirements so that if an institution in Connecticut chose to go to another accreditor that didn't have quite that same level of rigor, you would be guaranteed that any institution in Connecticut would have to follow those guidelines.
Thank you for that response. Does that mean that it would require some state level program approval?
Yeah, yes, I'm assuming that even if we had NETCHI approval, that the state would also need to ensure that the guidelines of the state had been followed as well.
Yeah, understood. Thank you. Are there any additional questions? Yes, Senator Slapp has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks for your time today. And you're the last one. So we'll wrap it up on a high note here just before 5. I'm wondering in particular with University of Hartford, I know that the school is in the process of dismantling, eliminating whatever the right term is, Hillier College, which is the 2-year degree granting college, my understanding, at the University of Hartford. So I'm just interested in how this kind of relates to the decision by the school to stop doing, I guess maybe you might have some capacity, but for the most part to stop doing 2-year degrees. Why is the 2-year degree not right, but the 3-year, the 90 credit hour, why is that the sweet spot for you all?
Yeah, let me clarify. You are correct that we are merging Hillier College, which was our 2-year granting college, with our College of Arts and Sciences. They were both liberal arts colleges. But even before that, when Hillier College was granting degrees, it was never intended to be a stop point. In other words, those were 2-year degrees on the way to 4-year degrees. So most of our Hillier College students stayed with us and continued with us to earn 4-year degrees. We still have associate's degrees at the University of Hartford, and we will continue to have them. They are mostly off-ramps, however. Students who, for whatever reason, cannot stay with us, whether it's financial or they need to get back home because of other responsibilities, and this would allow them to get a credential before they walk out the door. We are generally a baccalaureate institution at the undergraduate level at any rate, but we still offer associate's degrees as off-ramps if necessary.
Great. And just my last question is, what role does the faculty senate and your professors kind of play in this? I mean, if they probably have not weighed in on this yet, right? But will they at some point, and how does that work at your university? Thank you.
Yes, our curriculum process generally starts with proposals from the faculty, from a department. Then it goes to their college, which is their faculty of their entire college, and then it goes to the faculty senate, and then it goes to a university level committee of associate deans and so forth. So the faculty play a critical role in our curriculum review process. There is a program that we are discussing, right, a potential 90 credit degree program that we are discussing as a possibility. And we have had conversations with that department about that possibility. So they are very much involved in the process. We would not put forward any programs that didn't have faculty support and approval. That's just part of baked into our process.
They'll still have to vote on it at some point. Is
Oh,
that
yeah.
right? They'll take
Oh,
a
yeah.
position on it at some point?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
I actually do have one last question. The bill itself, Senate Raise Bill 396, amends Section 10A-34 of the general statutes. I don't know if you've read that statute. I'm sure you have not, but I have.
I've read parts
let
of
me
it.
tell you-
Yes, I
Let me
have.
tell you one thing that's interesting about that is it doesn't make mention of associate's degrees or baccalaureate degrees at all. The limitations to associates and bachelor degrees, I think, are embedded in state regulations, not in the state statutes. Is there a reason why amending the regulations that implement the section of the statute that allows for the conferring of degrees is not a preferred course of action?
Say, I'm not sure I'm following your question. Could you say it again?
Yeah, so we don't specify associate's degrees or bachelor's degrees in state statute. We allow the conferring of degrees, and it's regulations adopted by the Office of Higher Education that limit and really limit bachelor's degrees to 120 credits and associate's degrees, which are listed at 60 credits. And so we're amending the statute here. We're amending a statute to make mention of a 90 credit degree in a statute that doesn't mention the words associates or bachelor's degrees. So I'm just wondering why we're not amending why interested parties don't amend the regulations as opposed to changing the enabling statute.
And which supersedes which?
Well, I guess if we pass a bill, they have to make it comply, but regulations
I see.
comply with the statutes. But I guess what I'm saying is that there's the 120 degree credit requirement for a bachelor's degree is in regulation, not in statute.
Okay.
We can have that conversation offline. It's just a question about an approach for solving this issue. But thank you very much for your testimony. I'll follow up with your trade association maybe.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I don't think there's anybody else online, and so we've come to the conclusion of the list, and we'll close the public hearing. Our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday at what time are we meeting? Sometime. Thursday at 11. Okay, great. We'll see you then. Bye.